Chapter 2010. Before Departure 3. However, it is also because no one knows of our existence that we are safe and sound after Sir Yu's accident. Originally, we old men wanted to avenge Sir Yu. But Wu Jing's strength was beyond our imagination. Therefore, our revenge operation has never succeeded. Because of this, Old Man Ao was once wanted by that woman Wu Jing. Fortunately, Wu Qing didn't know who we were or how we avenged Master Yu. She only thought that we didn't accept her as the Divine Master, and wanted to find trouble with her. After that, we saw that we couldn't take revenge, so most of us went into seclusion. After a long time, Wu Qing didn't care about us anymore. Uncle Long continued. His emotions were brought back to tens of thousands of years ago. He had been hot-blooded before, but as the number of failed attempts at revenge increased, they slowly began to lose hope. Even so, they had never given up. It was just that they were no longer as passionate as before. Besides, they had been searching for Master Yu's two disciples for so many years. They needed someone to support them as they were losing their will. Now they had finally found Bing Yao, but she was poisoned. As for Shui, she had given them a surprise, but she was not strong enough to convince the others. This was also what Uncle Long was worried about. However, he had high hopes for Shui. As for the others, he could not guarantee anything. After hearing Uncle Long's words, Lung Ruoxia finally understood. It seemed like her master's charisma back then had attracted many people to follow him in secret. However, when the demon heard Uncle Long's words, he didn't think much of it. In his eyes, you was the biggest fool. And these people who idolized you were the dumbest of the dumbass. He scoffed at them. Uncle Long, thank you for everything you've done for my master. Lung Ruoxia said gratefully. Little girl, you're welcome. We were also attracted by Master Yu's personal charm. What a pity. But Sir Yu was harmed by a villain. Uncle Long sighed. It took them a long time to find some clues about Sir Yu's death. At that time, this fact shocked them because they knew very well that Sir Yu loved his sister, Wu Yan, very much. If it wasn't for Sir Yu who gave Wu Yan an unprecedented respect, Wu Yan wouldn't have such a high status in the divine world. However, who knew that the woman who looked gentle and lovely and always hid behind Sir Yu with a timid look was actually a beast in human skin? After knowing this fact, they finally understood what it meant to be a vicious woman, and what it meant to not judge a book by its cover. I won't let Wu Qin off. I'll take revenge for my master. Lung Ruoxia said with determination. Good. Good. Shui, I believe that Master Yu will be very happy to hear this. Hearing Lung Ruoxia's words, Uncle Long was extremely happy. Ao Jie could not help but say, Little girl, if you want to avenge Master Yu, the old whale and I will definitely help you. However, not all of us who avenged Master Yu were as kind as us. As for why I'm willing to help you, it's entirely because of the old whale, because I trust his vision. However, I trust you, but others may not believe that you have the strength. So whether you can use those old guys or not will depend on your ability. I'll inform them when I have the chance. Be prepared. Well, Shui, those old men are a good help. They've always wanted to avenge Master Yu. Unfortunately, our strength is limited and we can't do anything to Wu Yan. So, we have to hide for the time being. However, our desire for revenge has never stopped. Uncle Dragon added after hearing Ao Jie's words. In fact, he was very confident in Shui. Other than her weak strength, she was excellent in all aspects. However, he knew how monstrous Shui was. Hence, in his opinion, it was only a matter of time before Shui grew up. Uncle Long, is there nothing you can do about Wu Cheng's strength? Lung Ruoxia asked in disbelief. She was very clear about Uncle Long's strength. If Uncle Long said that he couldn't do anything to Wu Xian, then she really didn't dare to imagine how strong Wu Xian's strength would be. She was afraid that she would be on par with her master. Little girl, several tens of thousands of years ago, Uncle Long's strength wasn't as strong as it is now, and Wu Ling's strength was also beyond our expectations at that time. None of us expected that she had been hiding her strength all this time. After that, we began to cultivate in seclusion. However, after so many years, none of us have fought with Wu Ling, so we're not too sure how strong she is now. However, compared to several tens of thousands of years ago, I think she must be stronger. When Uncle Long said this, he was a little worried. That woman's strength was abnormal, but they didn't know why. This fact made him feel a little defeated. That might not be the case. The demon suddenly said, why? Uncle Long looked at the demon in confusion. That woman's bloodline isn't pure, so it's very difficult for her to improve her strength. Otherwise, she wouldn't have created that deceptive secret realm. I think that she must be in need of fresh blood to purify it now. Otherwise, it will be even more difficult for her to improve her strength in the long run. The demon said with a faint smile, but there was one thing he didn't say. If Wuxia didn't think of a way, her strength wouldn't become stronger. Instead, it would weaken day by day. This was definitely the proof that she was taking advantage of others. One must know that it wasn't easy to take advantage of others. Thinking of this, he suddenly became worried. After absorbing Yes nutrients, she should have died from the violent energy. After all, she didn't have the chaotic body. However, you had kindly saved her with his own blood, which created the half-chaotic body. However, from then on, she also had the habit of absorbing fresh blood. In order to prevent Wu Yan from killing more people, you had been feeding Wu Yan his own blood for a long time. Otherwise, Wu Yan's strength wouldn't have advanced by leaps and bounds. However, at the same time, Wu Yan's desire for blood had become stronger, especially for the imperial blood. Power and greed eventually led her to attack you. However, according to his guess, Wu Yan must have had her eyes on the imperial blood at that time. As for why she didn't succeed, he had no idea. Fortunately, she did not succeed. Otherwise, the current divine realm would really be in her grasp. When he thought of all this, he became even more worried about Shue'er's safety. This was because Shue'er also had the chaotic body. If Wuxia knew about this, she would definitely not let Shue'er off. After all, without you, the importance of Shue'er's chaotic body could be imagined. The purity of the blood within the chaotic body was incomparable to ordinary blood, which was what Wu Yan needed even more urgently. After all, he and Shue'er were the only two people in the world with the chaotic body. However, his chaotic body would definitely not want it, so protecting Shue'er was his top priority. However, he did not know if he should tell Shue'er these things now. After thinking for a long time, he finally decided to tell Shue'er. At the very least, Shue'er would be on guard. It was better to act than to act. After making up his mind, he immediately sent a message to Shue'er. After listening to the evildoer's story, Lung Ruoxue was stunned. She never thought that her blood would be so popular. It was wrong. It couldn't be put that way. It should be said that if Wu Yan wanted to achieve the chaotic body, the best way was to kill her and then change her blood. When she thought of this, she suddenly felt a little gratified. She had heard from the demon that Wu Yan still had a half-chaotic body. This meant that after Wu Yan killed her master, she didn't get her master's blood to change her blood. Otherwise, it would be even more difficult for her to avenge her master. Thinking of her master, Lung Ruoxue's heart ached again. Her master had died in the hands of that ungrateful Wuling wolf, Wuling. Her senior brother had also been killed by that woman. Hence, the hatred between her and Wuling would never end. However, this was also good as they would never let each other off. After all these incidents, it would only strengthen the hatred between them. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue's desire to become stronger grew even stronger. Wuling. She would not let him off. After listening to the demon's words, Uncle Long also had the idea of testing the fog's strength. After all, knowing one's enemy was the only way to win 100 battles. This time, other than finding something to cure Bing Yao's poison, he would also find that woman to spar with. At this moment, he still didn't know that the thing that Lung Ruoxue was talking about that could cure Bing Yao was actually the petal of the mist. However, even if he knew, he still had to go. After that, the four of them split up. Uncle Long and Aojia went to prepare the items that they might need on the way, while Lung Ruoxue and the demon went to bid farewell to Godfather and the rest. When Master Ning and the first elder found out that Lung Ruoxue and the others were going to find the antidote for Bing Yao, they wanted to follow them. However, Lung Ruoxue's words made them give up on the idea. Chapter 2011. Uncle Long's Old Friend 1. It was because Lung Ruoxue smiled at them and said, "Godfather, great elder, Our family needs you more." The two immediately agreed to stay when they heard this. They watched the five leave with reluctance. The extra person was Huanchen. Huanchen's expression was grave when he found out about Bing Yao. However, when he heard that Leng Ruoxue was going to the imperial city to find an antidote for Bing Yao, his expression became even more serious. In the end, he agreed to Leng Ruoxue's decision. After watching the five people leave, the Ning family's master immediately became listless. The first elder was also listless and silent. Seeing the two of them like this, Lu Feng and the others were helpless. Did these two old men really have to do this? It's not like that girl is not coming back. Unable to bear seeing them sighing all day long, Lu Feng and the others spent more time in their rooms, while Cheng Wu and the others would often stay in the Yao clan building. For a time, the Leng clan's main residence became deserted. After Leng Ruoxue and the rest left the Devil's Land, Huanchen teleported them away. In less than a day, they had arrived at the imperial city. However, when they were still some distance away from the imperial city, Huanchen had no choice but to return to the Huanchen space. After all, they were almost at Wu Chen's territory. He was afraid that the woman would discover his aura, so hiding was the safest option. After Huanchen returned to the Huanchen space, their original five-man team had turned into a four-man team. However, before entering the imperial city, Leng Ruoxue and the other three had also taken a disguise pill to avoid being recognized. After paying the entrance fee, Leng Ruoxue and the other three swaggered into the imperial city. The current imperial city wasn't unfamiliar to them, so Leng Ruoxue and the other three didn't stay on the streets for long. They immediately found an inn to stay in. The inn that they had found was not too big, and its location was a little remote. However, it was very suitable for the four of them. After all, they were dressed as cultivators who were not doing very well. It was natural that they could not afford to stay in a good inn. Moreover, the inn was quite far from the Divine Master's estate. Even if something happened in the Divine Master's estate, they would not be suspected too soon. After booking 2 rooms, Leng Ruoxue and the rest went straight back to their rooms and requested that no one should disturb them. Once they entered their rooms, Uncle Long immediately found a place to sit down, as if he had heaved a sigh of relief. Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but look at the room in front of her. This room was really simple. Other than a bed, a table, and a few chairs, there wasn't even a single decoration in the room. Fortunately, the room was considered clean, and it was worth their accommodation fees. However, when she saw Uncle Long's appearance, she couldn't help but laugh in her heart. She took the initiative to ask, "Uncle Long, are you tired?" "I'm not tired. I'm a little scared. Huanchen's speed is so fast that I feel ashamed." Uncle Long told the truth, and the gloominess on his face quickly disappeared. "Uncle Long, calm down. Dream dust is an artifact spirit, so we naturally can't compare to it." Leng Ruoxue smiled as she consoled Uncle Long. "Yes, Schwer is right. Little girl, the God Lord's mansion has always been heavily guarded. We have to come up with a plan. Otherwise, if we go in rashly, we might encounter danger." Uncle Long said cautiously. It was not easy to enter the Divine Master's residence. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, when he had decided to follow Master Yu, he had not even entered. It's best to get a map of the God Lord's estate first. Leng Ruoxue nodded. The moment she finished speaking, a white figure appeared in front of the 4 of them and said, "I've already prepared the map for you." It was dream dust. Seeing Huanchen's sudden appearance, Leng Ruoxue was worried. This fellow was too casual. He could go back and come out as he pleased. He didn't have any sense of organization or discipline. She really didn't know how he managed to be an artifact spirit. Even Green Vessel didn't have this ability. In reality, this was something that Leng Ruoxue did not know. When a weapon spirit reached their level, they could naturally exist independently of the weapon. It was not that Qingju did not have the ability to do so, but he was not at his peak. Therefore, Qingju could not leave the universal bracelet at this moment. However, even if Qingju could leave, he would not be like Huanchen, who liked to leave his body so much. To Qingju, his dedication was more important than anything else. He could not let go of the flowers and plants that he was taking care of. Leng Ruoxue's sorrow immediately turned into joy. when she saw Huan Chen's map of the God Lord's estate. She couldn't wait to open the map. After looking around, she couldn't help but ask, "Where is the main body of Rye Mice?" She searched several times but still couldn't find it. The main body of Rye Mice? Upon hearing this, Uncle Long and Huan Chen became alert at the same time. The two of them asked in unison, "Why are you asking about the location of Rye Mice's main body?" "I need the petals of her main body to refine an antidote pill for senior brother," Lung Ruoxue said guiltily. Before she came, she had only told Uncle Long and the others that she was going to the Divine Master's residence in Yu City to look for an antidote for her senior brother. However, she did not dare to tell them that the antidote she needed was the flower petals of Rye Mice, because she was afraid that Uncle Long and the others would object to it. Thus she could only hide it from them. However, it was obvious that she could no longer hide it from them, so she had no choice but to tell them the truth. When Uncle Long, Huan Chen, and Audiobook heard Lung Ruoxue's words, the three of them were stunned and could not react for a long time. Seeing them in this state, Lung Ruoxue's heart was in a mess and she became more and more uneasy. After a long time, only then did the three of them come back to their senses. Uncle Long was the first to shout, "Lung Ruoxue, you're getting more and more daring. You dare to hide such a big thing from us?" Uncle Long was furious. The consequences were severe. He called Lung Ruoxue by her full name. Furthermore, the moment he recalled that Lung Ruoxue had only planned to come here with the demon to retrieve the antidote, the anger in his heart would rise uncontrollably. Audiobook also looked at Lung Ruoxue with an expression that said, "I can't help you now." His handsome face was filled with disapproval. Only Huan Chen was relatively calm. After all, he was very clear about the demonic man's identity. If that fellow wanted to take the flower petals from the mist ripple's body, the chances of success were very high. But the premise was that he had to be at his peak. Now, Huan Chen didn't have high hopes for him. However, Huan Chen didn't dare to say this out loud. Otherwise, no one would be able to stop that demonic man when he got angry. Hence, even though he was secretly resentful of Lung Ruoxue's guts, he tactfully maintained his silence. "Uncle Long." Lung Ruoxue looked at Uncle Long pitifully. Hearing Uncle Long call her by her full name, Lung Ruoxue knew that he was very angry. However, she really had to come. She didn't mean to hide it from Uncle Long and the others. Besides, she didn't feel good seeing Uncle Long so angry. However, not only did her pitiful look not move Uncle Long, but it also made him so angry that he left with a flick of his sleeves. Lung Ruoxue was dumbfounded. Chapter 2012. Uncle Long's Old Friend 2. Uncle Long was really angry. Whoa. Lung Ruoxue felt so wronged. Then, she could not help but turn her beautiful eyes to Audiobook and Huan Chen, who knew that one of them would ignore her and leave, while the other chose to disappear. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxue was depressed. "Shue'er, don't worry, they will understand you." Knowing Shue'er's grievances, the evildoer pulled her into his arms and comforted her. "Evildoer, don't you think we should not hide it from them?" Lung Ruoxue asked gloomily. "Shue'er, you're not wrong. If you tell them about this, they will also be in a difficult position. After all, they had to save Bingyao. The longer they delayed, the worse it would be for Bingyao. However, they had to get the flower petals of that ingrate, Wu Ling, if they wanted to save Bingyao. The chance was slim, but they had to try. However, they'll be worried mainly because they don't know my identity. Why don't you tell them my identity? That way, they won't be so worried." The demon suggested after some thought. "You've really decided?" When Lung Ruoxue heard the demon's words, she felt touched. She knew that the demon was doing this for her, and was afraid that she would be blamed by Uncle Long and the others. After all, the demon had no intention of revealing his identity. "Yes, they are the people you acknowledge. Naturally, I will also treat them as my own people." The demon nodded. "Then you'll find a time to talk to Uncle Long and the others." Lung Ruoxue asked the demon, You've gone too far. You even hid it from me." At this moment, they heard Huan Chen's voice. Immediately after, the white-robed Huan Chen appeared before them with a cold expression. "Why are you here again?" The demon looked at Huan Chen and said with a look of disdain, "What's wrong with me showing up? I can't. Chen was a little annoyed. Did this guy find him an eyesore? Since they despise me, I have to appear in front of them more often. Otherwise, they will forget about me sooner or later, Chen thought to himself. No. Go back, Shui-er, and I don't welcome you. After hearing Chen's words, the evildoer's disdain deepened. I'll leave if you tell me to. That would be so embarrassing. Evil man, let me tell you. I'm going to be the third wheel. You want to chase me away? No way. Chen said in an infuriating manner. At this moment, he seemed to have forgotten how terrifying a demon was. All he wanted to do was to argue with him. However, not only did the demon not get angry, but he also revealed an alluring smile. Since you like to be a third wheel, I'll fulfill your wish. If you have the ability, don't ever go back to your space. Trying to goad me into action is useless. Chen roared. Then, he glared at Lung Ruoxue and said, Master, to think that I trusted you so much. How could you hide such a big thing from me? Aren't you the artifact spirit of the dream dust space? Since I'm your master, you should know what I'm thinking. Lung Ruoxue spoke the truth. She didn't intend to hide it from Chen like she did to Uncle Long. After all, it was hard to keep their relationship a secret. However, she didn't expect Chen to be unaware of this. Lung Ruoxue's words rendered Chen speechless. The demon looked at him with a half-smile. After a long while, Chen said angrily, I respected your privacy, so I didn't probe into your thoughts. Otherwise, how could I not know? Oh, I see, then I have to thank you properly. Lung Ruoxue said with a smile. With Chen's interference, she felt much less depressed. There's no need to thank me, but you're not allowed to hide such things from me in the future. Chen stated his conditions. Then he silently gave the demon a look. The two of them immediately had a tacit understanding. In fact, he had shouted at the demon on purpose. Who made his master unhappy? As his master's artifact spirit, he naturally had the duty to help his master solve his problems. When Lung Ruoxue heard Chen's words, she immediately nodded her head like an obedient child and promised, I'll tell you everything I know in the future, okay? Her attitude was good. It's fine as long as you don't hide such a big thing from me. Chen felt a cold wind blow against his body and couldn't help but shrink back. He didn't dare to let his master tell him everything. If that really happened, that demonic man would definitely cut him up alive. In addition, the reason why he didn't probe into his master's thoughts wasn't because he respected his master's privacy, but because that evil man had warned him not to pry into his master's thoughts, or else he would bear the consequences. At that time, when he heard these 4 words, he was so scared that he immediately put away the thought of peeking at master's thoughts. However, if he knew that the demon had only given him such an order, he would probably be even more depressed. And Lung Ruoxue nodded. She didn't intend to hide it from Chen. Chen didn't know. It was a beautiful misunderstanding. Chen was satisfied with Lung Ruoxue's quick response. He then asked with concern, Master Evildoer, how confident are you in obtaining the flower petals of rime ice? I'm not confident. The demon glanced at Chen and said straightforwardly, It can't be. Chen blinked his eyes in disbelief. I'm not sure. You know my current strength, but we'll try our best. The demon said very seriously, And you still dare to come? Chen was speechless. These 2 people were really bold. Could it be that the sheep wanted to enter the tiger's mouth of their own accord? What's there to be afraid of? Although we're not sure if we can get the flower petals of the rime ice, we still have to try. If we succeed, senior brother will be saved. Lung Ruoxue reminded. I know, but you can't rush to get that woman's flower petal. Chen said after some thought. Do you know something? When Lung Ruoxue heard this, she asked in surprise. That woman's true form is a plant, but she has a half-chaotic body, so the divine power in her body has never been very stable. The 1st and 15th of every new year are when her body is at its weakest. Those 2 days are the best days for us to take her petals. If we can sneak into the Divine Master's estate during those 2 days, our success rate will be very high. Chen explained. Chen, you've been staying in the Divine Master's estate all this time. Do you know where her true body is? Lung Ruoxue continued to ask after hearing Huan Chen's words. Although I know a lot about the God Lord's estate, I don't know where she has placed her main body. You should know that the place where her main body is must be the safest. Otherwise, if her main body is destroyed, her little life will also be lost. Huan Chen said with a frown. That woman's original body and doppelgangers were numerous, so it was not easy to find her. Hearing this, Lung Ruoxue felt a little depressed. However, she also knew that Huan Chen was right. It would definitely not be easy to find the main Boda's hiding place. Although I know it'll be difficult to find Rime Ice's main body, I won't give up, she said after sighing. Chapter 2013. Uncle Long's Old Friend 3. Master, I will help you. Huan Chen hurriedly expressed his thoughts, but as expected, he was glared at by the demon again. Yes. Lung Ruoxue nodded. The most important thing right now was to coax Uncle Long. Otherwise, her movements would be restricted. At the thought of this, Lung Ruoxue kept the illusion dust back into the illusion dust space. Then, she planned to look for Uncle Long with the demon. Master, I don't plan on returning to the dream dust space. Just as Lung Ruoxue was about to step out of the room, she heard Huan Chen grumbling in her heart. After a faint smile, she pulled the evildoer to the next room. Their rooms were next to Uncle Long's and Aojia's. After knocking on the door, Aojia's voice came from the room. Who is it? In fact, Aojia was a wise advisor. It's me. Lung Ruoxue said timidly. We don't want to see you now. Let's go back. Aojia said coldly. Uncle Ao, please listen to my explanation. Lung Ruoxue said coquettishly. However, Aojia was completely unmoved. No, I won't listen. I don't want to see you now. Aojia said without any room for discussion. After that, he did not say anything else. After hearing these words and seeing that Aojia did not respond, Lung Ruoxue was extremely disappointed. She looked at the tightly shut door, and stood outside Aojia's door for a while before she unwillingly brought the demon back to her room. However, as soon as she entered the room, the door of the next room opened. Aojia stuck his head out and looked at the empty corridor. He finally heaved a sigh of relief. Ooh, that was close. He had almost been exposed. Actually, the old whale wasn't in the room at all. Furthermore, it was the old whale who had repeatedly warned him not to open the door for Lung Ruoxue as a punishment for her audacity. However, when he felt Lung Ruoxue's disappointment and low spirits, his heart almost softened. If the little girl had stayed outside the door for a few more minutes, he might have surrendered. Fortunately, she had returned. Thinking of this, he closed the door and hid in his room. For 3 consecutive days, Lung Ruoxue tried her best to see Uncle Long and Aojia. However, Aojia was determined not to open the door for her. She did not even hear Uncle Long's voice. At that moment, Lung Ruoxue's sorrow deepened. In the room, Lung Ruoxue sat on a chair and sighed nonstop. 2 handsome men were sitting on the other chairs, and were admiring her sorrow without blinking. After feeling the gazes of admiration, Lung Ruoxue turned her beautiful eyes to the 2 of them and said helplessly, Are you bored? He actually laughed at her. This was really too much. Hee. Master, since you're so vexed, why don't we have a one-day tour of the God Lord's estate? Huan Chen suggested with a smile. He didn't take Uncle Long's anger to heart, nor did he think that Uncle Long would really be angry with his master. However, it was still possible that Uncle Long would give his master the cold shoulder for a few days. Therefore, when his master frowned, the sorrowful look on his face became a sight he enjoyed every day. Not only him, the evil man did not stop his master, but he was also enjoying it. After hearing Huan Chen's words, Lung Ruoxue sighed heavily. What's wrong? Does master think my suggestion is not good? Huan Chen asked in confusion. They had been locked in their rooms for 3 days. Other than going to the next room, they had almost never left the room. How could their master bear it? In his heart, his master should be very anxious to go to the Divine Master's estate to find out what was going on. I really want to go to the Divine Master's residence to find out, but if Uncle Long finds out, I'm afraid he'll be even more furious, so... Lung Ruoxue did not finish her sentence. I should coax Uncle Long first. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to concentrate when she moved. After Lung Ruoxue finished speaking, it was Huan Chen's turn to sigh. Why are you sighing? Lung Ruoxue could not help but ask. I'm sighing for you, master. It's been hard on you, Wu, Huan Chen said honestly. His clear eyes were misty, as if he was about to cry. Huan Chen's words made Lung Ruoxue's forehead fill with black lines. However, she knew that Huan Chen was teasing her because she had been in a terrible mood for the past few days. At this moment, someone knocked on the door. Lung Ruoxue quickly stood up to open the door. When she saw the person standing outside, she was momentarily dumbfounded. What's wrong? You don't want to see me? Uncle Long glared at him and said fiercely. No. Uncle Long, please come in. Lung Ruoxue was at a loss. She had been looking for Uncle Long for 3 consecutive days, but Uncle Long had refused to see her. Now he had actually taken the initiative to come to her. Was this true? Could she be dreaming? Lung Ruoxue pinched herself without a sound. Oh, it hurt. Then it wasn't a dream, and Uncle Long was really willing to see her. Lung Ruoxue was extremely excited, but her beautiful eyes were fixed on Uncle Long with hidden bitterness, as if she was afraid that Uncle Long would disappear in the next second. Naturally, Uncle Long noticed Lung Ruoxue's small actions. He laughed in his heart, but he still maintained a serious expression on his face. Is this the little girl you were talking about? Why does she look a little silly? Suddenly, an unfamiliar voice rang in Lung Ruoxue's ears. When Lung Ruoxue heard this voice, she suddenly realized that other than Uncle Long and Audiobook, there was another man she did not recognize at the door. The man's facial features were delicate, his skin was white, and he was very tall. He looked very young, no more than 30 years old, but his dark, diamond-like eyes were unusually sharp. He was looking at her with an assessing gaze, seemingly not very satisfied with her. As for the man's strength, he was also a reverent god. Lung Ruoxue knew that this person must have a very good relationship with Uncle Long, since he was able to follow her here. Otherwise, Uncle Long wouldn't have brought him to her. However, she sighed. The people that Uncle Long knew were indeed of high class. There were reverent god level and reverent god level, dazzling her eyes and making her unable to follow them. But this person, did she look that stupid? What's wrong with your eyes? This girl was very smart. If she's stupid, then there's no smart one in this world. Uncle Long glanced at his old friend and said indifferently, was Uncle Long complimenting her? Why did it sound so strange to her? Sop. Uncle Long is still angry. Oh really? I can't tell. The man glanced at Lung Ruoxue and said, then take a good look. You'll see. Uncle Long said without even blinking. Hearing the conversation between the two of them as if there was no one else around, Lung Ruoxue was in a dilemma. She was still here. Did Uncle Long and that man treat her like she didn't exist? Following that, the man really did listen to Uncle Long's words. He carefully sized up Lung Ruoxue again, and shook his head as he looked. Why is this girl so ugly? You're really ruining the appearance of the imperial city. The man made an important conclusion. When Lung Ruoxue heard this, she thought to herself, I've taken a disguise pill, alright? However, she could also tell that this man was here to cause trouble. Otherwise, why would he pick at her on their first meeting? In fact, if it wasn't for Uncle Long, she really wanted to shout. Who are you, old man? He was in charge of the heavens and the earth, and he even cared about what she looked like. Wasn't this catching a rat and being a busybody? Following that, Lung Ruoxue heard Uncle Long say in an unusually serious tone, it's safe to be ugly, it's better for women to be ugly. This time, Lung Ruoxue wanted to cry but had no tears. However, she endured it. If Uncle Long could agree with that man's words and not be angry at her for not telling him the truth, she would accept it. I'll just treat it as an entertainment for my family. However, Lung Ruoxue had clearly underestimated the man's strength. The man continued, but I don't like ugly women, especially ugly ones like this. His bright little eyes were full of disdain. The moment he said that, Lung Ruoxue immediately complained in her heart, I don't need you to like me. It was true. As long as the evildoer didn't despise her, she didn't care about what other people thought. Then she heard Uncle Long's reply. I didn't bring you here for a blind date. What does it matter if you like this girl or not? Besides, I forgot to tell you that this girl is already taken. Ark. No way. Someone actually wants such an ugly girl? The man turned pale with fright, his face still full of disbelief, as if he had heard something like a lake in the sky. Haven't you heard of carrots and vegetables having their own preferences? Just because you don't like it doesn't mean that other people don't like it. Uncle Long said indifferently. That's true. The man nodded in agreement, then said, I'm guessing that the person who likes this silly girl must be an ugly monster. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken a fancy to her. That might not be the case. Uncle Long said with a smirk. Did I guess wrong? No way. Who would have such bad taste? Seeing Uncle Long's reaction, the man said in disbelief. Uncle Long. Lung Ruoxua called out pitifully. Seeing the two of them echoing each other, she could not bear to listen any longer. Even though she did not interrupt to make Uncle Long happy, these two people could not ignore her existence. That was why she wanted to remind the two people in front of her not to ignore her. What's the matter? Uncle Long raised his eyebrows slightly and said in an unpleasant tone. Uncle Long's reaction made Lung Ruoxua feel rather helpless. It was Uncle Long who had come to look for her, all right? He actually asked her what she wanted? What the hell is this? Chapter 2014. In Form 1. After taking a few deep breaths, Lung Ruoxia's face was filled with grievance. Then she said softly like a little wife, Uncle Long, you're the one who came to find me. Oh. Uncle Long nodded and walked past Lung Ruoxua with his long legs. Audiobook and the unfamiliar man followed closely behind. The three of them worked together in perfect harmony. Lung Ruoxua saw this and thought to herself, am I being ignored again? Uncle Long. He was too evil. Uncle Long was definitely doing this on purpose. After the trio entered the room, they sat down beside the evildoer and Huan Chen and stared at them. None of the five of them said a word. The commotion they had caused at the door had been heard by the evildoer and Huan Chen, but none of them went out. They were hoping that Shui would calm Uncle Long down, but it seemed like he was still angry. Men. Especially when an old man was angry, he seemed to be even more terrifying. Looking at Uncle Long, the evildoer and Huan Chen sighed in their hearts at the same time. However, they had forgotten that they were also old men who could not be any older. As for Lung Ruoxua, she continued to be ignored by Uncle Long. Uncle Long. After standing at the door in a daze for a while, Lung Ruoxua took small steps and walked to Uncle Long's side with a smile on her face. She stood there as if she was being punished. However, it was as if Uncle Long did not see her. He continued to drink his tea and completely ignored her. Uncle Long. What are you trying to do? Lung Ruoxua couldn't help but let out a long sigh. He had already taken the initiative to look for her, yet he still ignored her. What is this? Lung Ruoxia's furtive glance at Uncle Long became more and more resentful, to the point that even Uncle Long couldn't take it anymore. Wretched girl, you're still feeling wronged. Uncle Long's body shivered and he sighed helplessly. Shui was looking at him. He even got goosebumps. Uncle Long, you're finally paying attention to me. Seeing that Uncle Long was finally speaking to her directly, Lung Ruoxua was overjoyed. Of course, the what's the matter that made her feel a little depressed earlier was also a part of her reaction. It was not counted. Who said I'm paying attention to you? The moment Uncle Long heard Lung Ruoxia's words, he immediately pulled a long face. Was Uncle Long being tsundere? Lung Ruoxua looked at Uncle Long, who was deliberately pulling a long face, and didn't know what to say. Audiobook had the same feeling as her. He peeked at Uncle Dragon with disdain and thought to himself, what an old whale. Aren't you too good at acting? Are you really still angry? If he was really angry, why would he go and find help for that girl? He even put down his old face to beg that peacock? Yes. The man who came with Uncle Long was Hua Peacock that Audiobook had mentioned. Of course, that person couldn't be a peacock. However, that person loved beauty and especially liked beautiful things. He was also a little arrogant, so they called him the peacock. As for the man's identity, On the surface, he was one of the only two reverent gods in the Divine Master's estate. However, in reality, that man was a spy on their side. However, they had not contacted him for a long time. This time, they were only contacting him because of that restless girl, Lung Ruoxue. In addition, that guy was a human, and not a beast. Therefore, no one would ever think that the person was related to them. This was also the main reason why the person had stayed in the Divine Master's estate as a spy. Girl, this man is Xianyi. You can call him Uncle Xian. Of course, you can call him that in private. It's best to pretend you don't know him when there are many people. At the thought of this, Audiobook took the initiative to introduce Lung Ruoxue. However, as soon as he finished his introduction, Uncle Long rolled his eyes at him, as if saying, "Who asked you to meddle in my business?" However, he understood the old whale very well, so he naturally didn't take Uncle Long's reaction to heart. Instead, he chuckled and did what he had to do. "Hello, Uncle Xian." After listening to Audiobook's introduction, Lung Ruoxue hurriedly greeted him. Even though this person was a little, he was brought by Uncle Long after all, so she had to give him some face. However, Audiobook's words made her feel a little depressed. She did not know if it was her or that senior Xian-yi who could not be seen in public. In short, one of them must not be seen in public. Otherwise, why would they have to call him Uncle Xian in private? However, based on Lung Ruoxue's short interaction with that man, she deeply felt that she was probably the one who couldn't be seen in public. That man liked beautiful women. If he were to hang out with an ugly woman like her, he would probably be afraid of being laughed at. Of course, this was just her own imagination. I heard that you're going to the Divine Master's estate to get the flower petals from the Rhyme Phoenix's body? Xianyi nodded and asked straightforwardly. When Lung Ruoxue heard this, she was shocked. She sneaked a glance at Uncle Long and saw that he was as calm as before. Her heart settled down. Since Uncle Long had told this man about this, he must be trustworthy. However, the man's straightforward words still caught her off guard. He was a little too direct. Following that, Lung Ruoxue nodded her head. Then, her beautiful eyes looked at Xianyi without blinking, anticipating his next words. However, after Xianyi asked this question, he didn't have any other reaction, which made Lung Ruoxue extremely depressed. Why did this person only finish half of his sentence? And the other half didn't show any signs, so how could she guess? More importantly, she couldn't read his mind. Sigh. Lung Ruoxue could not help but sigh. After a while, Xianyi finally spoke again. "Little girl, I didn't know that you were so bold," Xianyi said with a faint smile. "I'm still all right." Lung Ruoxue didn't know how to reply to this. Furthermore, after hearing Xianyi's words, Uncle Long's expression seemed to have darkened by another layer. As expected, Uncle Long also spoke. He was more than just bold. He's completely lawless. Uncle Long snorted coldly, his face still filled with anger. "Uncle Long." Lung Ruoxue called out softly. "Why?" Uncle Long said unhappily, but his tone seemed to have softened a little. "Uncle Long, I know I was wrong. Please don't be angry anymore, okay?" Seeing that there was a chance, Lung Ruoxue hurriedly tried to please him. She even patronized Uncle Long by helping him to massage his shoulders, making Uncle Long feel very comfortable. However, she still put on an "I'm very angry, and the consequences will be very serious" expression on her face. However, Lung Ruoxue knew that Uncle Long's current state was enough to show that he was no longer angry. It was just that he still felt a little embarrassed, and didn't want to forgive her too quickly. Thus, she only needed to put in some effort to coax him, and everything would be fine. At the thought of this, Lung Ruoxue became even more attentive. He even gave Uncle Long a massage and served him tea and snacks. His service was very thoughtful and meticulous. Even the evildoer was a little jealous, but for Shuer, he endured it. Even though the evildoer had endured it, Lung Ruoxue could still feel a pair of resentful eyes following her, making her feel as if there was a dagger on her back. Her little heart trembled. Then, she poured a cup of tea for the evildoer and took some snacks. Instantly, the evildoer's face bloomed like a flower in spring, and a smile appeared on his face. Chapter 2015. In Form 2, upon seeing this, Lung Ruoxua wiped the cold sweat off her forehead and thought to herself, that was close. However, evildoers were still easy to please. At least, in her opinion, he was much easier to please than Uncle Long. Because the demon was appeased with a cup of tea and some snacks. But Uncle Long. After a long while, Uncle Long's face was finally no longer as stiff as before. Lung Ruoxua also heaved a sigh of relief. Then Uncle Long, whose attitude had softened, formally introduced Xian Yi's identity. Shuai, this guy is a reverent god of the God Lord's estate and an old friend of ours. Besides, he knows the locations of a few doppelgangers in the mist. However, we'll have to verify whether the original body is among them. Uncle Long sighed. When he first found out that Shuai was looking for the real body of the ripple, he was angry and angry. He was angry that Shuai didn't tell him in advance. Angry that Shuai was putting her life at risk. However, he soon realized that Shuai had to come because she had to save Bing Yao. After that, he went to see his old friend in person and explained the matter to him. However, when Xian Yi heard what they were going to do, he also showed a shocked and incredulous expression because such an idea was too crazy. Besides, because of Shuai and Bing Yao's identity, Xian Yi had to take this seriously. However, Xian Yi had also made it clear to him that he could only help in secret and couldn't expose himself. Uncle Long was also well aware of this. Now was not the time for Xian Yi to show his cards to the Divine Lord's estate. Xian Yi had also requested to see Shuai, so he had brought that fellow along. However, other than his nature, Xian Yi had picked his nose and looked at Shuai on purpose. He wanted to test Shuai's character and see if she was worthy of his help. At the same time, he wanted to take revenge for himself, who asked him to be so angry in front of his old friend, and even complained to that girl. That was why the two of them had sung the same tune at the entrance earlier. After Lung Ruoxua heard Uncle Long's words, she immediately looked at Xian Yi in surprise. Then, she turned to Uncle Long and said, as long as we know the location, we can verify the rest ourselves. Little girl, I don't object if you want to personally test it out. However, with your strength, do you think you can see Wu Chen's clone? Not only is the place where her clone is hiding heavily guarded, but there are also many formations set up to protect her. Although I heard from the old whale that you're quite skilled in formations, I'm afraid that she'll find you before you can dispel the formation. With her strength, you won't be able to escape. Xian Yi glanced at Lung Ruoxua and poured cold water on her head. From his point of view, the girl in front of him was a bit ignorant of the immensity of heaven and earth. How could the petals of the mist ripple's main body be so easy to take? This would probably be more difficult than killing her directly. More importantly, he was not optimistic about these people's strength. Although he knew a few places where the fog ice clone was hiding, there were people guarding each place. Moreover, the people guarding them were basically the hidden forces of the fog ripple. He didn't even know the strength of some people, so he didn't think they would succeed. But the old whale would never say these words. Although the old whale also felt that this trip was a little dangerous. He had spoiled that girl a lot. He could see this, so he could only be the bad guy. At the very least, he had to take into account the dangers they would encounter. Otherwise, if these people were caught by fog, the consequences would be unimaginable. I know this is very dangerous, but no matter how difficult it is, I have to give it a try. I must save my senior brother. After Lung Ruoxua heard Xian Yi's words, she said with an unusually firm will, with me here, it's enough to ensure Shuai's safety. At this moment, the evildoer spoke up. Although the man named Xian Yi was doing this for their own good, his pride as the mistress of the dark world would not allow himself to be looked down upon by others. As soon as the demon said this, Xian Yi immediately turned his attention to him and sized him up with his shrewd eyes. After sizing him up, Xian Yi was extremely surprised to find that he couldn't see through this man. This was really too strange. You are, Xian Yi asked cautiously, am Shuai's fiancé. The demon laughed. Oh, what's your strength? Xian Yi asked directly, who asked him to not see through it. He's currently a divine emperor. The demon replied honestly. Divine emperor? Then where did you get your confidence from? Even I, a reverent god, wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. Xian Yi was speechless. Was it because he hadn't come out for a long time, So these little guys had become somewhat unfamiliar to him? AI. A newborn calf is really not afraid of a tiger. Xianyi couldn't help sighing. Although my strength in the divine realm is at the divine emperor level, I cannot be considered as a person of this realm. The demon laughed. Since he had decided to reveal his identity to them, it didn't matter if one more or one less person knew about it. Now was just the right time. Lung Ruoxue understood the demon's meaning and helped him finish his sentence. My fiancé's real identity is the master of the netherworld prison. Uncle Long and the other two were stunned by his words. The three of them were stunned, and only reacted after a long time. However, the three of them still couldn't believe it. They stared at the demon doubtfully, trying to find some clues from his face. To their disappointment, they couldn't see anything about the man in front of them. He didn't look like the master of the nether prison at all. As old-timers in the divine realm, it was impossible for them not to know about the mistress of the dark world who was as famous as the divine lord. Although no one had seen the mistress of the dark world before, they were no stranger to her great name and some of her shocking deeds. However, after observing for a long time, they still couldn't see any similarities between this monster and the famous mistress of the dark world. The legendary mistress of the dark world was cruel, cold, bloodthirsty, and emotionless. She was not an easy person to get along with. However, the man in front of them did not seem to have any of those qualities. Hence, they could not believe Lung Ruoxue's words. Especially Uncle Long. He had spent a long time with the evildoer and knew his personality well. He knew that this guy was a fan of Shui and would put Shui will first in everything. How could such a man be the legendary decisive, bloodthirsty, and emotionless man? If the demon was really the mistress of the dark world, then Uncle Long would definitely sigh that rumors couldn't be trusted. In reality, the things that they knew about the mistress of the dark world were indeed the evildoer's personality. However, in front of Lung Ruoxue, the evildoer would naturally not appear with that appearance. That was why they felt that the evildoer was not what the rumors said. The evildoer was already prepared for this. After taking the antidote for the disguise pill, the evildoer had returned to his original appearance. He was immediately enveloped by a layer of faint black light. Immediately after, the shadow of a pair of huge, black wings shimmering with dark light appeared on his back. The wings were slightly spread, and they almost occupied the entire room. At this moment, the pressure that the evildoer was releasing made people have the urge to worship him. Chapter 2016. In Form 3, when Uncle Long and the other two saw this, they almost couldn't control their urge to kneel down. However, with a light gesture from the demon, the three of them immediately stood up straight. Naturally, the demon wouldn't make them kneel before him. After all, Uncle Long was an elder recognized by Shui, and the other two would definitely be Shui's helpers. So for Shui's sake he would naturally be more tolerant of these people. After that, the evildoer retracted his aura, and the tense atmosphere in the room returned to normal. But Uncle Long and the other two couldn't calm down for a while. This scene shocked Uncle Long and the other two men. Now they couldn't doubt the demon's words anymore, because they had never felt such pressure from anyone else except Lord Yu. Not even Wuxia could make them feel that way. It was an impulse that made people want to worship him. It was not something they could control. At this thought, the three of them realized that their clothes were already wet. The oppressive atmosphere they felt just now only lasted for a few seconds, but they could still feel the natural gap between them and the other party. You're really the mistress of the dark world? After a long while, Uncle Long regained his senses and asked in disbelief. His originally shrewd eyes were now at a loss. Now he didn't know how to get along with this devilish man. He was under a lot of pressure. Didn't you all see it? You guys should be familiar with my signature wings, right? The demon smiled gently. He knew that the scene just now had a huge impact on the three people in front of him. However, this was not something he could control. It all depended on the ability of the three of them to withstand it. Yes, of course, they were not unfamiliar with it, because Master Yu also had such a pair of wings. Moreover, those wings were the symbol of the Master God and the Master of the Dark World. They were not created by a divine skill, nor could they be compared to the divine skill wings. After thinking about it, the three of them calmed down. Then they bowed respectfully to the demon and said, "Greetings, mistress of the dark world. No need to be so polite. You are people that Schwer acknowledges, so naturally you are also my own people. That's why I hope we can still get along like before." The demon laughed. Yes, the three of them were still very respectful. In reality, they also wanted to be more relaxed. After all, even though the mistress of the dark world was as famous as the Lord God, she couldn't control anything in the divine world. To put it bluntly, she couldn't control them. However, the reputation of the mistress of the dark world was there for all to see. Therefore, they did not dare to relax for even a moment. When the evildoer saw them, he could only feel helpless. However, the demon knew that they were like this because they had just found out about his identity and were a little unaccustomed to it. He should be back to normal after a while. After that, he deliberately lowered his presence to avoid giving them too much pressure. AI. Schwer was the best. She wasn't afraid of him at all. He was a little depressed as he thought to himself, "Godfather, now you know why I must come." At this moment, Lung Ruoxua opened her mouth. Actually, when she saw the demon's illusionary wings, she was also a little surprised. It was because those wings were too beautiful, gorgeous, noble, and filled with a sense of mystery. Besides, she also wanted to touch them to see how they felt. Unfortunately, the demon retracted his wings too quickly. However, it was also fortunate that she had kept them away. Otherwise, not many people would be able to withstand that kind of pressure. Who knew that the moment Lung Ruoxua said that, Uncle Long's eyes immediately widened. "You brat, why didn't you tell me his identity earlier? If I had known earlier, would I have been so worried?" However, he was a little worried now. It was not because he was afraid, but because of the identity of that demonic man. He was under a lot of pressure. "I didn't tell you guys because I was afraid you guys would feel pressured." Lung Ruoxua deliberately pouted her pink lips and said, her face full of grievances, "But you're still telling us now, aren't you?" Uncle Long was a little angry. He was under pressure. Sob. Why did this brat tell him? "If I don't tell you, you'll be worried. If I tell you, you'll be under a lot of pressure. I'm really in a dilemma. However, in order to make you feel more at ease, it's better to tell you the identity of this evildoer. So I don't regret it." Lung Ruoxua explained in a serious tone. "Of course you don't regret it. They were the ones who regretted it." The three of them thought to themselves, but since things had already come to this, they couldn't pretend that they didn't know anything. AI. She really didn't know how to get along with that devilish man in the future. When Lung Ruoxua saw the three of them struggling, she knew that they were not used to it yet. Hence, she consciously changed the topic to the location where the fog ice clone was hiding. "Uncle Xian, tell me where the fog ice clone is hiding." Lung Ruoxua seemed to be in a hurry, but in reality, she was in a hurry. They had been in Imperial City for 3 days, and they had not made any progress. "All right then." Xianyi nodded and stopped pouring cold water on Lung Ruoxua, who asked her to have such a good fiancé. AI. He had someone backing him. Then he revealed everything he knew. "As far as I know, although Wu Yan has many doppelgangers, most of them are just smokescreens and not her real doppelgangers. Her real doppelgangers and her real body number no more than 4, and those few are naturally the strongest. However, Wu Yan is very cautious, so any hiding place is very secretive and guarded by many people. The few locations I know of were discovered by accident, and they are very suspicious. As for the strength of the clone inside, I'm not too sure. It can be said that this place could be a powerful clone, or it could also be her main body, or it could also be a smokescreen she used to confuse others. As for the specifics, you'll have to investigate it yourself," Xianyi said. After he finished speaking, he took out the map of the Divine Lord's estate. The location of the fog ice clone was marked in red. There are 2 places that are underground. Huan Qin glanced at the map that Xianyi had taken out and said in surprise. According to what he knew, that woman hated the underground the most. Although she was a flower, it seemed that she had some kind of psychological barrier to the dark and damp underground. Therefore, he had never thought that the woman would hide in the place she hated the most for her safety. This had greatly exceeded his expectations. Yes, the guards there are also the tightest. Xianyi nodded. How did you discover these two locations? Huan Chen's star-like black eyes sparkled and were filled with curiosity. It was unintentional. When I'm free, I'll wander around the Divine Master's estate, so I know that these two places are different from the rest. I've also seen men in black send people there, but when they came out, they were already dead. Xianyi recalled. Are you sure that's not Wu Cheng's cell? Huan Chen asked with a faint smile. No, I've never seen the people guarding there before. They're not part of the Divine Master's estate, so I guess they should be the hidden forces of Rime Ice. Otherwise, why would they need to be so sneaky and secretive? I wanted to find an opportunity to get close to that place, but I've never succeeded. Xianyi said with some regret. So you're not sure that's the place where Rime Ice is hiding? Huan Chen asked. Although I've never entered that place, I've entered another place before. This is the place. This is a secret room in the Divine Master's estate. There just happens to be a blood cherry blossom there, and the person guarding that place has the same aura as the people in the two places underground. Therefore, I'm sure that that place is also the hiding place of the Fog Ice clone. As for her main body, it's possible that it's there. Xianyi pointed to another place and said to the crowd. As for Huan Chen's doubts, he explained them very patiently. After all, he did not expect these people to agree with his guess 100%. However, after hearing Xianyi's explanation, Huan Chen did not continue asking. As for Lung Ruoxue, she decided to investigate all these suspicious places. After all, she did not want to let go of any chance of finding the Fog Phoenix's main body. Following that, the group discussed in detail about the people or things they might encounter in the Divine Master's estate. Xianyi even specially instructed Lung Ruoxue and the others to pay special attention to a few people, especially their auras. They had to conceal their auras well. Otherwise, they would be discovered by the people from the Divine Master's estate before they could even come into contact with those suspicious locations. After the discussion, Xianyi got up and left. 2 days later, Lung Ruoxue, the evildoer, Uncle Long, and Aojia made their preparations and headed to the Divine Master's residence. Huan Chen returned to the dream dust space, ready to remind them of certain things that they should take note of. Before he stepped into the Divine Lord's residence, Uncle Long sent a message to evildoer. He was still worried and said, Little Bratyi, I'll leave Shui-Er's safety to you. No matter what, you must ensure the safety of Shui-Er. After 2 days of getting used to it, he was already able to accept the fact that the demon was the mistress of the dark world. Moreover, the two of them had returned to their usual way of getting along, which was something the demon was happy to see. After hearing Uncle Long's words, the demon promised seriously, Uncle Long, don't worry. I will protect Shui-Er. Chapter 2017. First Meeting 1. Uncle Long nodded in satisfaction after hearing the demon's words. From his point of view, it was already very difficult for that brat Yi to protect Shui-Er. After all, Yi Chen was only a divine emperor in this world. More importantly, it was not convenient for that brat Yi to make a move in this world. Therefore, even though he knew the demon's identity, he did not expect that brat Yi would be able to get rid of Rime Ice. After all, this was a matter of the divine world. If the mistress of the dark world were to interfere, it would not be allowed by the laws of heaven and earth. After finding out that Shui-Er was Master Ye's disciple, he felt that Shui-Er was the best person to avenge Master Yu. However, with Shui-Er's current strength, it was unrealistic for her to avenge Master Yu. However, with Shui-Er's demonic talent, he believed that she would be able to get rid of Wu Yan and avenge Master Yu in time. So it was only a matter of time for them. After all, it was never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. They had waited for so long. Time was not a big deal. He was also very happy to see Shui-Er grow up. He would feel very gratified. With this thought in mind, Uncle Long's gaze towards Lung Ruoxue became even gentler. This little girl was the most talented human he had ever seen. With the identity of Master Ye's disciple, he was very certain that the future of the divine world would belong to this little girl. Now that he could personally witness the growth of the junior he liked, it was something that was worth looking forward to for any human or beast. At this moment, Uncle Long's heart was filled with excitement. His eyes had turned from gentle to fiery. Lung Ruoxue immediately sensed this change, and her hair stood on end. Ugh! Uncle Long's gaze was so scary. She was scared. Even though she did not know what Uncle Long was thinking, Lung Ruoxue was certain that it was related to her. Otherwise, Uncle Long would not be staring at her with such a fiery gaze. When she thought of this, she could not help but be on her guard. Her beautiful eyes that were looking at Uncle Long were also filled with curiosity. "You brat, what's with that look?" Uncle Long laughed as he sent a message. He knew that this girl must be overthinking things. It's nothing." Lung Ruoxue was a little embarrassed as she hurriedly replied. "Uncle Long, let's go in quickly," she urged. "In." Uncle Long nodded. Then, the four of them walked into the Divine Master's residence as if there was no one else around. After entering the Divine Master's residence without a sound, Aojia was excited. Invisibility was still the best. He could go wherever he wanted to go, and he wouldn't be easily discovered. Unless the other party was more powerful than them, it would be difficult to detect their aura and any traces. With that thought in mind, Aojia deliberately walked to the front of the Divine Master's estate's guard and provoked him silently. He even made all sorts of strange moves. As long as he could think of it, he would do it. Lung Ruoxue could not help but laugh when she saw him doing so. On the other hand, Uncle Long had a helpless expression. His face was red as if it was written, "I don't know this person." Immediately after, Uncle Long, who could not stand it any longer, grabbed Aojia's collar and returned to the team of four. Then he gave Lung Ruoxue and the demon a look before the four of them continued to move forward. As they were afraid of splitting up their forces, the four of them decided to act together. This way their safety would be greatly increased. As they walked through the Divine Master's residence, Lung Ruoxue looked at the magnificent buildings and beautiful scenery. This God Lord's estate is indeed extravagant. The main body of the Divine Lord's residence was a dazzling golden color. It was the kind that glowed with a golden light. From afar, the entire palace stood in front of them, dazzling their eyes. The garden of the God Lord's manor was also very large. There were all kinds of rare and precious plants growing in it, competing for beauty. However, the flowers were mostly red. All kinds of red and pink flowers bloomed. One could smell the fragrance of flowers without even getting close. However, Lung Ruoxue didn't like the fragrance at all. She felt that the fragrance was too strong, and it made her feel very uncomfortable. At this moment, Qingju's angry voice rang out in Lung Ruoxue's heart. Humph! Of course it was extravagant. Did she think that others didn't know that she was a nouveau riche? And the flowers here are just like that woman, so ugly. And, hearing Qingju's words, Lung Ruoxue nodded in agreement. Sister, this flower seems to be poisonous. Quickly take an antidote pill. Suddenly, Qingju said anxiously. He had just discovered that these flowers did not look like a big deal on their own, but when they were mixed together, they were extremely poisonous. When he thought about how Wuxian had planted these poisonous fog in the garden, he was instantly furious. What was that woman trying to do? However, he immediately thought that the woman would not have poisoned everyone who had come to the Divine Lord's estate. In that case, the poison must have been specially prepared for people like them who had trespassed the Divine Lord's estate. However, there were not many people who dared to break into the Divine Lord's manor. However, this was the most likely scenario. While Green Vessel was thinking about this possibility, Lung Ruoxue had already distributed the antidote pills to Uncle Long, the demon and Aojia. When the three of them saw that Lung Ruoxue had suddenly given them a pill, they ate it without thinking. After that, they could clearly feel that their bodies were much more refreshed. Before they had eaten the pill, they had already felt their bodies heat up. However, they had not thought much about it at the time. Later, when they saw the pill that Schwer had taken out, they had all guessed that there was something wrong with the God Lord's estate. After thinking about this, Uncle Long and Aojia couldn't help but blame Xianyi in their hearts. They were angry that that guy didn't give them a heads up in advance, and almost caused them to fall into his trap. If it wasn't for Schwer, they would have returned with nothing and might have become prisoners of the Divine Lord's estate. After all, The crime of trespassing the Divine Lord's estate was not light. However, they had really wronged Xian Yi because he didn't know that there was something wrong with the flowers and plants in the Divine Lord's estate. Moreover, he had long been immune to the flowers and plants here after living in the Divine Lord's estate for many years. More importantly, Wu Jing couldn't possibly let the flowers and plants in the Divine Lord's estate harm her people. Therefore, she had already given the antidote to the people in the Divine Lord's estate, but they didn't know about it. After this brief interlude, the four of them moved even faster and headed straight for their first destination. The first place they chose was located at the southernmost part of the Divine Master's estate. There was a courtyard there that had not been occupied for many years. However, it was not abandoned because, according to Xian Yi, Wu Chen claimed to be a thrifty person. Therefore, although no one lived in the courtyard, he still sent people to clean it every day. When Leng Ruoxue heard Xian Yi's explanation, she scoffed at it. No one was living there, yet they still sent people to clean and repair it. Wasn't it more expensive? However, Wu Yi should be a rich woman, so it was understandable that she was a little extravagant. Just like what Qing Ju had said, that woman was a nouveau riche. Otherwise, she would not have made the Divine Lord's estate so magnificent. She did not think that her master's taste would be so bad. Chapter 2018. First Meeting 2, Right. In the past, the God Lord's estate was like a fairyland. That was truly beautiful and magnificent, not as tasteless as it is now. Qing Ju could sense Leng Ruoxue's inner thoughts, and he started to roar like a furious green. When he saw the current state of the God Lord's estate, he was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. One had to know that the God Lord's estate used to be such a sacred existence in his heart. But what was this now? If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't leave the bracelet of heaven and earth, he would have gone to find the ripple mist to settle the score. Grandpa and I was a vulture who had taken over the nest. Not only did he kill the old master, but he also turned the old master's divine master's residence into a nouveau riche-like place, causing the last bit of hope he had to disappear without a trace. Qing Ju was so hateful. He had decided that when he recovered his strength from his prime, he would definitely teach that woman a lesson. As they listened to Qing Ju's inner roar, Leng Ruoxue and the other three had already silently approached the courtyard. From the outside, the courtyard did not fit in with the magnificence of the Divine Master's estate. It looked too ordinary and the walls were old. There were only a few leaves on the branches that extended out of the courtyard. It looked like late autumn, and it made one feel melancholic. However, after she entered, Leng Ruoxue was shocked to discover that the courtyard could not be judged by its appearance. It looked like an ordinary courtyard, but there was actually a whole new world inside. Compared to the depression outside, the inside of the courtyard felt like spring. Hundreds of flowers were in full bloom in the small garden. The verdant lawn and verdant trees all indicated the arrival of spring. Additionally, the temperature inside the courtyard was a bit higher than that outside. Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but feel astonished when she saw this. However, she would be happier if the black-clothed men were not busy in the courtyard. The aura of these men in black was just like Black One and the rest. They were filled with violence and bloodthirst. One look, and one could tell that they were people stained with blood. Leng Ruoxue and the other three were curious when they saw that they were moving boxes into a room. They walked closer and Audiobook opened one of the boxes when no one was looking. His expression changed immediately. He let go of the box and it closed with a bang. "Who is it? Come out. Don't be so sneaky." A man in black heard the movement and quickly looked around, but he didn't see anything unusual, so he could only shout. However, what answered him was a gust of wind. As for Leng Ruoxue and the other three, they held their breaths to prevent the black-robed man from detecting any traces of them. At this moment, the slightly annoyed Uncle Long glared at Audiobook fiercely. Audiobook returned the look with an aggrieved expression. Both of them were communicating telepathically at the same time. "You idiot, don't you know how to be gentle?" Uncle Long roared in his heart. How could this guy not be as steady as Shui when he did things? Had he lived all these years in vain? He was so frivolous. Fortunately, he had come with them. If he had come alone, he would have been discovered by the men in black. "I was just scared." It's not like I did it on purpose. Aojia looked at Uncle Long and said, "What's inside? You're actually scared?" Uncle Long was surprised. "It's a dead man," Aojia said with lingering fear. His face turned pale when he thought of what he had just seen. Dead? Have you never seen a dead person in your life? Or have you never killed anyone? Upon hearing Aojia's words, Uncle Long said with a look of disdain, "It was just a few dead people, but they could scare that guy to such an extent." In Uncle Long's heart, this was definitely a useless performance. Furthermore, he felt that this situation should not have happened to Aojia. This was not normal. This was definitely not normal. If he died a normal death or was killed, I wouldn't have this reaction. You don't know, but the man I saw just now was so scary and terrifying. His whole body was shriveled up as if he was sucked dry by something. It was too scary. Aojia had never seen such a dead look. When he said that, his body was trembling. Rarely seen, often strange. I'll be fine once you get used to it. If I'm not wrong, the cause of that person's death should be the blood cherry blossom, Uncle Long said with certainty. Seeing how nonchalant Uncle Long was, Aojia could not help but widen his eyes and said, "You're not afraid? What's there to be afraid of? It's not the first time I've seen a dead person like this. Schwerer has seen one too. She's even more courageous than you." Uncle Dragon looked at Aojia with disdain again. After hearing what Uncle Long said, Aojia was deeply worried. It seemed that he was really ignorant. Could it be that I've had too many peaceful days recently, so my courage has degenerated? At the same time, the man in black, who was on edge, let go of the suspicions in his heart, and continued to move the boxes into the room. Lung Ruoxue and the other three followed behind the man in black and entered the room. When they reached the room, Lung Ruoxue and the rest saw that the room was filled with boxes. They already knew that the boxes contained dead people, but they were not sure why the other party was collecting these dead people. What Lung Ruoxue wanted to know more was the location of the blood cherry blossom that had caused the deaths of these people. "Green Vessel, can you read their minds?" Lung Ruoxue sent a voice transmission to Qingju. The weakest among the men in black was a deity emperor. She wondered if Qingju could read their minds. "I'll try," Qingju said. Although it was a little difficult to read the minds of people who were stronger than him, his sister had the strength of a divine king now. These people were only one level higher than his sister. Therefore, reading their minds should not be a problem. With that, Qingju immediately aimed at one of the black-robed men. He sent his divine sense into the man's head. The black-robed man only struggled for a moment, then stopped moving. Of course, to outsiders, the black-robed man only seemed to be stunned for a moment. In reality, Qingju was reading his mind. Qingju read the man's mind in a matter of seconds, and the man's shock only lasted for the blink of an eye. Therefore, after doing all this, the man in black did not feel much different, only feeling a slight headache. However, he obviously didn't think too much about it, and just continued doing what he was supposed to do. Following that, Qingju did the same thing and used mind reading on the other men in black. However, to his disappointment, he did not find anything useful. Instantly, Qingju's small face fell. "Sister, these men in black don't know anything. They should be at the bottom of the hierarchy. I didn't find anything useful in their minds," Qingju complained. When Lung Ruoxue heard Qingju's words, black lines appeared on her forehead. These men in black were the lowest of the low? These people were all deity emperors. If they could only be considered as the lowest level, then how terrifying would the strength of the middle and high-level black-clothed men be? Not all of them were reverent god level, right? If that was the case, wouldn't reverent god level cultivators become cabbages? Chapter 2019. First Meeting 3. However, Lung Ruoxue knew that reverent god-level cultivators in the god world were not as common as cabbages. This was because there were only 2 reverent god-level cultivators in the god lord's estate, and the fact that these men in black did not know anything about them could only mean that they were not the core figures in Ripple's heart. At the thought of this, Lung Ruoxue could not help but sigh. The 3 guys in her hands should be Wuhan's confidants, right? However, the 3 of them were reverent god level, so Qingju could not read their minds for the time being. Otherwise, she would have been able to get more information. After being depressed for a while, Lung Ruoxue quickly regained her calm. Then, she sent a voice transmission to the demon, Uncle Long, and Ao Jia. Following that, the four of them went to the secret room in the courtyard. Following the mark on the map, they found the secret chamber. Lung Ruoxue stood in front of the secret chamber and looked at the door, deep in thought. Shuer, what's wrong? Seeing Shuer standing there in a daze, the demon transmitted his voice in confusion. There's no formation outside this secret chamber. Lung Ruoxue looked at the demon and asked. She clearly remembered that Xianni had mentioned that Wuxian's hiding place was protected by an array, and had people guarding it. However, not only was there no one guarding this secret room, there wasn't even an array. This was too strange. Could it be that this is a fog barrier that Wuxian deliberately set up? After listening to Lung Ruoxue's words, the demon's eyes flickered as he guessed. He was very clear that this woman was extremely cunning. Otherwise, she wouldn't have hidden herself for so many years and finally schemed against that idiot Yu. If it's a maze, there should be someone guarding it, right? That way we can confuse the enemy, right? Lung Ruoxue asked. You're right. However, that woman's thoughts are very deep, and it's normal for her to do things that are contrary to common sense. Why don't I go in and check it out first? The demon said after thinking for a while. Shuer, what's wrong? At this moment, Uncle Long could tell that something was wrong with Lung Ruoxue, and asked her with concern. Uncle Long, I'm just curious why there's no one guarding this place, and there's no formation outside the secret room. Lung Ruoxue voiced her doubts to Uncle Long. Don't think too much about it. Won't we know once we go in and take a look? Uncle Long thought for a while. And Lung Ruoxue nodded. Then, she reached out and pushed open the door of the secret room gently. The four of them looked at each other, and walked in one step after another. At the same time, on the throne in the Divine Master's estate, a woman in red who had her eyes closed suddenly opened her beautiful eyes. Her eyes were full of light, which was very charming. With a flash of light, the woman in red disappeared from the throne. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue and the other three had entered the secret chamber. However, they were disappointed to find that there was nothing in the secret chamber. The entire secret chamber was empty. However, before Lung Ruoxue and the other three could do a thorough search, the space around them started to fluctuate. Following that, a lady in red appeared in the secret chamber. Instantly, Lung Ruoxue and the rest were on their guard. After that, for safety reasons, she moved the four of them into the bracelet. Although she didn't know the woman's identity, the woman's pressure was too strong. She didn't dare to be careless, nor did she want to risk the lives of Uncle Long and the others, so she had to hide. Uncle Dragon and the evildoer were already used to the sudden change of environment. However, Ao Jia was not calm at all. He stared at the dense spirit chi that was almost liquid in front of him. He was obviously at a loss. When he came back to his senses, he looked surprised. However, when he saw that Uncle Long's reaction seemed to be quite accustomed to it, he was too embarrassed to ask, his stomach full of questions. One had to know that he was Beastie, who prided himself on his intelligence. Therefore, he would never ask questions that he should not ask. Just like that, Ao Jia was forced to calm down. At this time, Uncle Long looked at the screen and frowned. Wu Chen's reaction is really fast. I didn't expect that we would alert her. Yes. The woman in red who had suddenly appeared in the secret chamber was Wu Ling, and Uncle Long knew that the woman was definitely coming for them. However, he couldn't understand why Wu Ling had discovered their existence when he clearly didn't sense any restrictions in the secret chamber. Fortunately, they were invisible, and the little girl had this space. Otherwise, they would have become prisoners. She's Wu Chen. Uncle Long's words caused Lung Ruoxue to turn her attention to the red-robed lady in the light screen. This Wu Jing was indeed as beautiful as the legends said. Red eyes, red hair, smooth skin, a noble temperament with a trace of bravado. The gorgeous red clothes set off her heat like fire. At this moment, her eyes were like rubies, shining brightly, and her deep eyes seemed to be able to suck people in. This kind of miasma was really difficult for men to refuse. No wonder it was rumored that she had many admirers in the divine realm. However, the three men beside her didn't seem to be interested in fog. Lung Ruoxue found it funny when she saw the evildoer and the other two frowning. If the three of them performance was known by the admirers of Rai Mice, they would probably vomit blood out of anger, right? I didn't expect her strength to have already reached such a level. Suddenly, the frowning evildoer spoke. What? Lung Ruoxue looked at the evildoer in surprise, her little face filled with question marks. This woman's strength is only a step away from becoming the true lord of the divine realm. It seems that her strength has improved very quickly over the years. The demon said expressionlessly. However, in reality, his heart was in a state of shock. In the past, Wu Chen's strength was nothing in his eyes. However, the current Wu Chen at least had the strength to fight with him. Moreover, he could not win against Wu Chen with his current strength. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but worry. Xue Er's strength was far inferior to Wu Xian's. Right now, Wu Xian could defeat Xue Er with just a finger. Moreover, his current strength was not at his peak, so it would be very difficult for him to defeat Wu Xian. More importantly, he could think of ways to protect Xue Er's safety, but he could not go on a killing spree in the divinity. To put it bluntly, he could not easily make a move in the divinity. Otherwise, the laws of the heaven and earth would probably meddle in his business again. Looking at Xue Er who was beside him, the demon pulled her into his arms and thought to himself, no matter what, I will definitely protect Xue Er's safety. The best way is to avoid the two of them meeting too early. After all, there is a huge difference in strength between the two of them. If they meet too early, it would not be conducive to Xue Er's growth and would even hurt Xue Er's self-confidence. At the same time, the demon's mind began to spin as he thought about how they could avoid the miasma. However, that woman's vigilance was too high. It didn't seem realistic to take the petals from her body without disturbing her. He was worried. While the demon was secretly feeling dejected, Lung Ruoxue was looking at the fog in the light screen, and was eager to try. This woman was the strongest of her kind that she had ever met. Therefore, Lung Ruoxue was very eager to fight with her. When she saw fog ice, she felt as if she had seen her nemesis. She was extremely excited. However, when she saw the serious looks on the demon, Uncle Dragon, and Aojia's faces, she did not dare to voice out her thoughts. Otherwise, the three of them would go crazy. However, her thoughts could not be hidden from Qingju and the little beasts who had recognized her as their master. Sister, you're not a match for that damn woman Wu Yan right now. So don't even think about fighting her. I won't allow it. Qingju stood in front of Lung Ruoxue and transmitted his voice to her. Otherwise, that evildoer would definitely fly into a rage if he were to say these words. And little master, if you see fog ice now you have to hide. Otherwise, I'll tell your thoughts to that evildoer. I'm afraid you don't know, but he's extremely overbearing in some aspects. Quan Chun, who had been silent all this time, also threatened. Then Baby, Charm, and the other small beasts also sent a voice transmission to Lung Ruoxue in unison to express their concern and worry. They knew their master too well. Their master was definitely someone who would go to the Tiger's Mountain, even though she knew that there were tigers there. Qingju, Quan Chun, and the little beastie spoke one after another, causing Lung Ruoxue's head to buzz. At this moment, there were too many voices in her head and it was a mess. In the end, Lung Ruoxue had no choice but to promise them some unfair conditions and promise that she would never appear in front of Wu Xiao on her own accord. Only then did they feel at ease. AI, this woman is really difficult to deal with. Uncle Long, who was also staring at the light screen, chimed in after the demon. Just now, when the woman appeared in the secret room, he could clearly feel that the fog was definitely stronger than him. He was deeply depressed about this. He was no match for the fog in the past, and after cultivating for so long he still couldn't defeat the fog. This fact made him feel a little depressed. Aojia kept sighing and his face turned black. Lung Ruoxue couldn't bear to see them like this and couldn't bear it any longer. Uncle Long, Uncle Ao, can you guys cheer up? Isn't it just a rhyme ice? Although we might not be as strong as her, she definitely won't be able to find us. You mean we've been hiding here all this time? Aojia's eyes widened, and he asked speechlessly after hearing Lung Ruoxue's words. I can't. Lung Ruoxue blinked her beautiful eyes and said innocently. She didn't think that hiding was a big deal if she couldn't win. She wouldn't be ashamed of it, so she was rather calm. Schwer is right, let's hide first. Uncle Long sighed and agreed. Chapter 2020. Hatred Born Out of Love, 1. With Uncle Long's words, the four of them temporarily stayed in the bracelets with peace of mind. At this moment Wuxia, who was in the secret room outside, frowned and was puzzled. It was really strange. She had clearly felt the aura of a stranger, but after teleporting here, she had found nothing. What was going on? Wu Jing didn't understand. In fact, when she came here, she also felt the aura of a stranger for a moment. However, the aura was very short and disappeared very quickly, which made her more suspicious. After a careful search, she did not find any clues. She finally confirmed that the stranger's aura she had felt before had disappeared. Thinking of this, Ripple Mist was furious. No matter who the other party was, since they dared to come here to die, then they couldn't blame her for being ruthless. With this thought in mind, the fog disappeared from the secret room in a flash of light. However, although Lung Ruoxue and the rest saw that Wuxia had left, they did not go out immediately. They were afraid that this was a plot by that cunning woman, Wuxia. Naturally, they were not in a hurry to go out. There was food and drink in the bracelet, so the four of them ate while observing the movements outside. A day later, Wu Jing didn't come back. Uncle Long, should we go out now? Inside the bracelet, Lung Ruoxue saw that the fog ripple had not appeared for a long time. She asked Uncle Long. Having an old man in the family was like having a treasure. So such a big matter naturally had to seek the approval of the elders in the family. As for the evildoer, although his actual age was older than Uncle Long, he was automatically ignored by her. No hurry, let's wait a little longer. That woman is very cunning, maybe she is peeking at us from somewhere. Moreover, she's already suspicious, so she naturally won't give up so easily. Uncle Long picked up a piece of snow-white fish and put it in his mouth as he spoke. And Lung Ruoxue nodded. Although that woman had not appeared for a day, she also felt that it was not suitable for them to go out now. One must know that they had already attracted that woman's attention. If they went out now, they might fall into her trap. In fact, just as Uncle Long had said, Wuxia wouldn't give up on the abnormal situation she had discovered easily. Even though she was not in the secret chamber, she was in the main hall, and her divine senses were focused on them. As soon as Lung Ruoxue and the others left the bracelet, she would definitely find some clues. She had been thinking about why she could not see them, and how they had entered the Divine Master's residence. All of a sudden, an idea flashed through Wu Chen's mind as he thought of the word invisibility. Although this term was not unfamiliar to the people of the Divine Realm, there were not many people who could truly become invisible. It could even be said that they were very rare. As far as she knew, invisibility was not an innate talent of a person or a beast. That ability was usually reflected in equipment. In other words, if one wanted to have the ability to be invisible, they had to refine equipment with invisibility attributes. To create an invisible attribute, they would need something called an invisible stone. However, an invisible stone was a legendary item. Where such an item could be found had always been a mystery. More importantly, even with the invisible stone, it was impossible to find it. Equipment might not necessarily give invisibility, and it all depended on luck. Since ancient times, there had only been a limited number of equipment with the invisibility attribute in the celestial realm. There were definitely no more than 3 of them. 2 of them were in her hands, and the other one had long disappeared. Thinking of this, the expression on Rhyme's beautiful face couldn't help but become a little solemn. If the other party really had equipment that could make her invisible, then it would be a little troublesome. However, it was not that there was no way to break it, but the price to pay for it was quite high. Just thinking about it made her feel pain. Some time ago, the treasure house she had hidden in the secret realm was stolen, and her losses were not small. Although it was not all of her property, it was almost half of her total property. So after knowing this, she was furious. Unfortunately, until now, she had not hidden clearly who had stolen her treasure. Although she had suspected Lung Ruoxue and the others, She did not think that they had the ability to steal her things without alerting Black One. But now that she thought about it, if the other party had equipment that could make them invisible, they should have the chance to steal her things, right? However, she immediately denied her own guess. After all, in her eyes, Lung Ruoxue was just a little brat with slightly better luck and slightly better aptitude. She had not been in the god world for long, so it was impossible for that little brat to have such a heaven-defying item. It was also because of her preconceived thoughts that she had never thought that the aura of those strangers could be Lung Ruoxue and the others. She had always thought highly of herself. In her mind, not everyone had the courage to come to the Divine Master's estate and cause trouble. That damned girl who was only a god-tier master naturally did not have the courage to do so. Moreover, she had always had many enemies. So for a moment, she really did not know who the person who had come was. The person who came this time would not be Bing Yao. That guy had been injured by her when he came to the Divine Master's estate to investigate a while ago. She didn't know where he was hiding. Hence, Bing Yao was also excluded. Who could it be? Wu Jing thought for a long time, but she couldn't figure out whose aura it was. However, she wasn't a person who liked to go to a dead end. She naturally had to put aside things that she couldn't understand for the time being. Then she summoned 2 subordinates and gave them some instructions. The 2 subordinates left, and after a while, they came back and handed a storage ring to Wu Jing. Ripple received the ring and teleported away. Then, with a flash of white light, the mist Ripple appeared in her own pill refining room. In fact, this pill refining room couldn't be considered her own, because this was Yu Yuan's temporary pill refining place. However, after Yu Luan fell, this place officially became her private place. Everything here was exactly the same as when Yu was alive. With a trace of sorrow on her beautiful face, Wu Chen looked around the alchemy room, and a monstrous anger suddenly welled up in her heart. At this moment, she had the urge to smash everything here again, but she didn't do it immediately. After all, this was where all her memories from her childhood were. This was also the only place where she shared memories with you, and the only place she could keep intact. After living with you for so many years, it was impossible for her to not have any feelings for him. On the contrary, she had deep feelings for you. In her eyes, there was only the handsome man who everyone looked up to. She was once like everyone in the divine realm, full of worship and respect for you. However, she didn't know when it started, but she was no longer satisfied with this worship complex of an idol. She wanted more. Chapter 2021. Hatred born out of love, 2. She didn't want to look up at the man in her heart with adoration anymore. She wanted to stand side by side with the man she loved. She wanted to let him know that she was no longer the little girl who needed someone to love and take care of her. She had grown up. She was already a mature woman. Unfortunately, to her disappointment, you only treated her as a child. Even if her mind and body had long matured, even if all the men in the divine realm were crazy for her, she was unable to attract Yes' heart. Yes' gaze had never stayed on her for too long. Sometimes Yes' attitude towards her was no different from his subordinates. Sometimes he would even smile at his subordinates. However, he did not smile at her. Especially after knowing her feelings for him, you even deliberately distanced himself from her. This fact once drove her crazy. When she thought about it, her heart still ached faintly. Why don't you like me? The mist instantly smashed everything in the pill refining room as if she had gone mad, and she howled in pain. Yes, she hated him to the core. However, her love had turned into hatred. She hated him, but at the same time, she couldn't forget him. So, every time she saw everything here, she was in extreme pain. However, this was the place she had always liked to come to after Yu Luan died. Every time she came here, she would madly smash things and then restore them. After all, she wouldn't really destroy this place because this was the only place where she and you had memories. As for the other places, they had already been destroyed or disappeared, but this place was the most intact. So even though she smashed it, in the end, everything was exactly the same as before. After venting, Wu Yan's mood quickly calmed down. Following that, she came to the pill furnace. There was a small cluster of light purple flames burning below the pill furnace. The temperature of the furnace was a little high for ordinary people, but it was just right for refining pills. After that, she took out a few medicinal herbs from the storage ring that her subordinate had given her, and put them into the pill furnace. Very quickly, the medicinal herbs melted into a liquid. After a few simple incantations, the dissolved medicinal liquid slowly condensed into white powder. Wu Yan picked up a little of the white powder with a thin metal stick, put it to her nose and sniffed it. Then she nodded in satisfaction. Success. Although she knew little about alchemy, refining these things was not a problem. This was also the simplest alchemy, and she did not even need to form a pill. This white powder was the powder that could locate the invisible person. Although the powder looked ordinary, the medicinal herbs used were all of the highest quality. However, in order to find the invisible person who had intruded the Divine Lord's residence, she had to endure the pain. She put the powder into a white porcelain bottle and quickly left this place that she loved and hated. Then, she returned to the main hall and prepared to wait for the rabbit. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue and the rest still didn't know that they had been treated as rabbits. However, even if they knew, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. They could only be more careful. However, Lung Ruoxue definitely didn't think that she had the potential to become a rabbit. She had always been a hunter. After staying in the bracelet for a few more days, Lung Ruoxue and the others still did not dare to leave the bracelet. After all, there was a cunning, alert, and unfathomably powerful Wuxia here, so they had to be careful. However, after staying in the bracelet for a few days, Lung Ruoxue became more and more depressed. She felt an indescribable sense of powerlessness. When she came, she thought that if she and the others were careful, they might not alarm the rhyme whirlpool. But she did not expect that as soon as they moved, they were discovered by the rhyme ripple. If this continued, how could they successfully complete the mission? Lung Ruoxue paced back and forth on the empty ground in frustration, causing Uncle Long and the others to feel dizzy. Shwea, don't go in circles, I'm getting dizzy. Uncle Long couldn't help but say, Uncle Long, I'm so annoyed. Lung Ruoxue said with an aggrieved expression. I am also annoyed. However, Wu Yan is not easy to deal with, and she is more powerful than us. This is her lair. So we can't think of any good way except to endure. Uncle Long sighed. The gloominess on his face was no less than Lung Ruoxue's. Ai. Sighing sounds were heard one after another, and the atmosphere in the bracelet had also dropped to the lowest. Big sister, let me take you out of this secret chamber. At this moment, Qingju said after thinking for a while. You have a way? Lung Ruoxue asked in surprise when she heard what Qingju said. I can turn into a speck of dust, attach myself to the air here, and leave this secret chamber. Qingju said honestly. You brat, why didn't you say so earlier? You've trapped us here. Uncle Long immediately gritted his teeth. You guys didn't ask me. Besides, I thought my sister would have thought of it. Qingju said with an aggrieved expression. He did not say it on purpose because he did not want his sister and the others to rely on him too much. It was fine to hide here with him, but he did not intend to help his sister and the others with anything, unless his sister herself thought of using him. Even if he helped them, he wouldn't help them too much. They would have to rely on themselves. After all, this was a rare opportunity for his sister to train. Therefore, he only had to ensure the safety of his sister and the others. Everything else was not within his scope of concern. But now, it seemed that he had to make a sound. Because his sister didn't think of his ability at all, which made him a little depressed. More importantly, he couldn't bear to see his sister like an ant on a hot pan. So his heart softened. Hearing Qingju's words, Lung Ruoxue blinked her eyes and could not help but ask, Qingju, you can still turn into dust? Her thoughts could not keep up with the rest of Qingju's sentence. She was obviously more interested in the dust that Qingju mentioned. Sister, I can turn into many other things, but dust is the smallest of them all, and it's also the most difficult to be discovered. Qingju said with a smile. Although he was not in his prime, the universal bracelet was an innate divine weapon born from chaos. Therefore, no matter how strong he was, he could block the enemy's detection. Therefore, no matter how strong Wu Han was, he would not be able to detect his existence. Otherwise, Wu Han would not have sensed the aura of strangers, but could not find their whereabouts. Now it seemed that bringing them out of this secret chamber was the best way. Otherwise, they would have to stay here indefinitely. If that continued, his sister would go crazy. Yes, yes. Hearing Qingju's words, Leng Ruoxue nodded her head repeatedly. Then she excitedly carried Qingju up. However, she did not dare to kiss him. Otherwise, the evildoer who was staring at her covetously from the side would definitely fly into a rage. Hence, whether it was for her or for Qingju, she could not do that. Chapter 2022. Hatred Born Out of Love 3. Sister, let's leave this place first. I'll take you to the next place. Glancing at the devilish man not far away, Qingju said with a little disappointment, Woo, ever since my sister has a man, she doesn't dare to kiss me anymore. Although in the past, when my sister kissed me, I would always joke that she's a pervert, but now, I don't even have the chance to make my sister perverted anymore. So, I'm a little disappointed. All right. Leng Ruoxue heaved a sigh of relief when she finally got to leave this place. Just like that, Qingju turned into a tiny speck of dust and drifted with the wind. He controlled his direction and followed the air, heading towards his next destination. Wu Jing's attention was still on the secret chamber. Hence, she was not aware that Leng Ruoxue and the rest had already left. Not far from their next destination, through the bracelet screen of light, Leng Ruoxue could see the black-robed men guarding outside as well as the formation that was emitting a faint pressure. This was normal. Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but think to herself, Schwer, this place is so heavily guarded. If we break the array and go in, I'm afraid we will alarm them. At that time, Wu Qing will definitely come. Uncle Long analyzed the situation in front of him. Before he came here, he did not expect to alert the fog so early. Therefore, they were caught off guard for a while. Now they did not dare to act rashly. Otherwise, when the fog arrived with the black-robed man here, it would be difficult for them to win. However, with Xue'er's space, he did not have to worry about safety. Although the odds of winning against the fog were not great, it would not be easy for the fog to capture them alive. At least, they had the help of that little fellow, Qingju. It would not be a problem for them to escape. At the thought of this, Uncle Long was full of confidence. Without any worries about escaping, he wanted to go to the places marked by Xian Yi and destroy them. They should be changing shifts, right? Well, go in when they're changing shifts. Leng Ruoxue tried to suggest. That's a good idea, but I don't know when they'll change shifts. Uncle Long was a little worried. Before he came here, he didn't think that he would be discovered by the fog so early. Therefore, he didn't know the situation of the God Lord's estate very well. However, now he regretted it. Why didn't he ask more about it? It seemed that his vigilance and defense were much worse than before. It was all his fault for living in peace for too long. No, he couldn't go on like this. At this moment, Uncle Long realized his own problem, so he made up his mind to arrange a training plan for himself after leaving this place. Otherwise, he would waste it if he continued. However, Leng Ruoxue wasn't as pessimistic as Uncle Long. The reason why she didn't ask Xian Yi too much about the Divine Lord estate was because Huanchen was around. She could just ask Huanchen when the time came. In the past, the God Lord's estate had a shift every 48 hours. I'll probably have to ask Huanchen now, Qingju said after thinking. Although Huanchen spent most of his time in a deep sleep, he had never left the Divine Lord's estate. Therefore, he should know about this. Just as Qingju had expected, Huanchen's voice rang in Leng Ruoxue's heart as soon as he finished speaking. Young master, the old rules of the Divine Master's estate have not changed much. As such, there will still be a shift every 48 hours. After Huanchen finished speaking, there was no more sound. After confirming it, Leng Ruoxue informed Uncle Long and the rest. Then they waited outside the secret room. While waiting for the guards outside the secret room to change shifts, Leng Ruoxue started to study the formation outside the secret room. The formation in front of him was a defensive-type attack formation. In other words, when there were no enemies, it was only responsible for defense. Once an enemy invaded or tried to break the formation would turn from defense to attack. At that time, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. Therefore, this formation was quite troublesome. Lung Ruoxue looked at the array and frowned. Even though she didn't know who set up this array, the person who set up this array must have a high level of attainment in it. This defensive type attack array was definitely of the highest grade. Just as Lung Ruoxue was racking her brain over the formation, the guards outside finally changed shifts. When Lung Ruoxue noticed this, she immediately focused her attention. At this moment, a leader of the men in black stood in front of the formation. As he cast a few spells, the formation stopped operating. Lung Ruoxue's face lit up when she saw this. Could it be that they had to check the things in the secret room when they changed shifts? If that was the case, it would be good news for Lung Ruoxue and the rest. It had to be said that Lung Ruoxue and the others were quite lucky. Every time these people changed shifts, they would carefully check the secret room for any abnormalities in order to distinguish their responsibilities. Otherwise, if something really happened, none of them would be able to escape. These men in black were naturally unwilling to die with others, so they were particularly serious when they checked. After the formation outside the secret chamber stopped, a few men in black entered the secret chamber. Green Vessel controlled himself to turn into dust and slipped in as well. After entering the secret room, the screen in front of Lung Ruoxue displayed the entire secret room. This secret room was not big, and there were not many decorations inside. However, in the middle of the secret room, there was a pool made of white jade. The bright red blood in the pool seemed to be boiling, and there was a blood cherry blossom in the pool. Lung Ruoxue's eyes lit up when she saw the flower. However, at this moment, she was unable to tell if this flower was the main body or a clone. "Oh, go out and take a look." Lung Ruoxue thought for a while, and said to the crowd, "Sister, there's no need to go out. This is just a clone, and a fake one at that." Qingju called out to Lung Ruoxue, "Are you sure?" Lung Ruoxue lifted her beautiful eyes and asked Qingju, This blood cherry flower only has a faint trace of pressure. Fog's clone isn't that weak." Qingju said with certainty. Oh, Lung Ruoxue was a little disappointed. However, she did not want to make a wasted trip. Even if it was just a fake clone, she had to give him a gift. At this thought, Lung Ruoxue had an idea. A colorless and odorless powder floated out of the bracelet of heaven and earth and fell into the white jade blood pool. Other than Qingju, Uncle Long and the others did not notice her little trick. After that, while the men in black handed over their duties, Qingju drifted away from the secret room with the wind. After that, they went to a few more places. Furthermore, they had sneaked in while the men in black were handing over their duties. However, the blood cherry blossoms in those places were fake as well. Hence, Lung Ruoxue left behind a small gift in the same manner as before they left. Half a month's time passed by very quickly. Lung Ruoxue and the rest had not found anything. The few places that they had confirmed were all fake. This fact made everyone feel a little depressed. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue and the rest were guarding the entrance of an underground secret room, waiting for the men in black to change shifts. This was one of the 2 underground locations that Xianyi had mentioned. At the same time, it was also the only 2 places that Lung Ruoxue and the rest had not explored. Lung Ruoxue, who was in the bangle, sighed again. She had lost count of how many times she had sighed. There were still 2 places that she had not checked. If there was nothing here as well, she would definitely fly into a rage. "Sister, calm down. If it wasn't for the fact that our current strength is limited, we could have searched the entire God Lord's estate. However, it's already good that we've searched to this extent." Qingju consoled. "This is all your credit," Lung Ruoxue said softly in a depressed tone. "If it was not for Green Vessel, they would not even be able to search these few places." "What's mine is big, Sister S." Qingju laughed. Then he raised his small head and focused his gaze on Lung Ruoxue. He knew that his sister had suffered quite a blow these few days. She felt as if she had no use at all. She also felt that her actions were a little frustrating. However, he did not think that this was her fault. The main problem was that woman, Fog, was not easy to deal with. Therefore, in order not to alert that woman, they had to be extremely careful. Otherwise, if they made a slight move, that woman would immediately teleport and appear in front of them. At that time, they would be even more passive. Yes, mine is also Schwerer S. At this time, the demon also said. When Lung Ruoxua heard their conversation, her heart felt warm and a smile finally appeared on her face. At this moment, the black-robed men outside started to change shifts. Qingju sneaked into the underground secret room while they were changing shifts. As soon as he entered, Qingju felt a powerful pressure hit him in the face. His eyes immediately flickered, and he turned to the blood cherry blossom in the blood pool in the secret room. He said, "Big sister, this blood cherry blossom is one of Wu Yan's clones. It's a real clone." Really? The moment Lung Ruoxua heard this, her beautiful eyes shifted towards the blooming blood cherry blossom in the middle of the blood pool in the secret chamber. This blood cherry blossom was deep red in color. Its petals were layered, making it exceptionally beautiful. The diameter of the flower was close to 1 meter. At the pistil in the middle of the flower, blood could be seen flowing faintly. When she saw this flower, she knew that this was definitely not a fake flower. It was easy to tell the difference between a real and a fake clone. However, no matter how powerful this flower was, it was not the main body and was not what she wanted. Moreover, although she had the idea of destroying the vampiric flower, she did not dare to act rashly now. Otherwise, it would alarm the fog, and it would be more difficult for them to find the fog's original body. Chapter 2023. Speculations 1. This fact caused Lung Ruoxua to feel exceptionally depressed. After searching for several days, he couldn't even see the shadow of the main body. He finally confirmed a clone, but it still didn't move. Didn't this mean that he could only look at the delicious food in front of him but couldn't eat it? Of course, the blood cherry blossom was definitely not a delicacy. However, he still could not touch it. "Sister, let's leave this place first." Qingju understood his sister's feelings very well, but now was not a good time to make a move on this clone. If he was discovered by Fog Ice and became vigilant, he would not be able to continue searching for his main body. He was afraid that his opportunity to stay in the Divine Master would be taken away. Are we just going to leave like this? That's the woman's clone." After hearing Qingju's words, Aojia said with some reluctance, "What else can I do? Don't tell me you want to destroy this clone." Uncle Long raised his eyebrows and said indifferently. In fact, he was also sullen, but he had no choice. He couldn't move his clone. Otherwise, Wu Xian would definitely come. Their main purpose in coming to the Divine Lord's manor was to find her original body, not her clone. "I want to." Aojia was very honest. The strength of Fog Ice's clone and the main body was very different. If one of her clones was destroyed, it would affect the overall strength of Fog Ice. By then it would be relatively easier to deal with Fog Ice. It was definitely not easy to cultivate a clone with such strength. If one of her clones was lost, wouldn't the woman be heartbroken? He thought to himself evilly. What he didn't know was that Wu Chun had already lost a clone. Mist Ripple had a total of 3 bodies, one of which was her main body and one of her doppelgangers. When she had been cultivating with her doppelgangers, she had split her strength into 3 parts. The 2 doppelgangers each had 30% of her total strength, while her main body had 40%. After so many years, the 3 bodies had been cultivating on their own, so the strength she had transferred to the doppelgangers had been restored long ago. The 2 doppelgangers now had the cultivation of hierarch level, and their strength was only slightly weaker than her main body. Losing any of his clones was something that Wu Yan could not bear. One should know that her 2 clones could exist independently, and also merge with her. As independent clones, they already had the strength of a reverent god level. Once the 3 of them merged into one, her strength would definitely surpass that of a reverent god level. This was the main reason why Aojia wanted to destroy her clone. However, the timing was not right. Hence Aojia could only think. With regret in his heart, Qingju led the group out of the secret underground room. Otherwise, the longer they stayed, the more depressed they would be. Before they left, Lung Ruoxua still dropped a small gift into the blood pool for Wu Jing. However, the little thing she dropped this time was different from the previous ones. Soon they came to another underground secret room. This was also the last place Xian Yi told them where Wuxia was hiding. After patiently waiting for the guards to change shifts, Qingju sneaked in with everyone. However, to their disappointment, the flower here was also a fake clone. Lung Ruoxua was filled with anger as she threw a lot of things into the blood pool. When Qingju saw this, he could not help but feel embarrassed. He knew that his sister was angry, but she had no way to vent her anger. Hence, she could only vent it on this fake clone. Fortunately, her sister was still rational. The things she threw in would not take effect so quickly. However, once those things took effect, Fog would definitely be flustered. After looking through the places Xian Yi had provided, the location of the Fog Ripple's main body was still a mystery. After some discussion, they decided to leave the Divine Master's estate first and have a good rest. Then they would decide on their next move. After making the decision, Qingju brought Lung Ruoxua and the rest out of the Divine Master's residence without a sound. Wu Han, who had been monitoring the secret room with his spiritual sense, saw that the other party had not revealed a single trace after so many days and couldn't help but wonder if he had made a mistake. However, she didn't think that she had sensed it wrongly. So what was going on? Unable to figure it out, she temporarily withdrew her divine sense and no longer continued to stare at that place. In any case, unless the aura of those strangers no longer appeared, as long as they made a move, she would definitely notice. After Lung Ruoxua and the others returned to the inn, they immediately appeared in the room. Uncle Long, Aojia, and Lung Ruoxua were all a little depressed. The demon could only smile and comfort them when he saw them like this. We've checked those places. This result is quite good. After all, it's not that easy for us to find the main body of the rime ice. And Uncle Long nodded in agreement. I am just a little regretful. It would be great if I could get rid of her original body. Aojia was still thinking about this. I also want to. However, if we were to get rid of her main body, I'm afraid that we would be wanted by the entire divine realm. That's because she would definitely go crazy. Uncle Long said indifferently. What do you mean again? When Aojia heard the word again, he immediately became alert and asked. In the secret realm, we once killed a blood cherry blossom. I believe that was one of her clones. Uncle Long guessed. The blood cherry blossom was very powerful, and it was definitely not something her fake clones could compare to. However, the flower had died to Shui-Er's flames. There was such a thing? How come I didn't hear anything about it? Aojia asked in confusion after hearing what Uncle Long had said. Logically speaking, Wu Qin should be furious after losing a clone. However, he didn't notice anything at all. This was unbelievable. How could there be no news? The black-robed men of the Rime Mist sect have already come to find us. However, I think the reason why she didn't specifically target us is mainly because she can't be sure who killed her clone. After all, those who knew the truth at that time wouldn't say a word, and most of the black-robed men she arranged in the secret realm have died. Otherwise, why would she have bided her time? Uncle Long analyzed. However, he didn't think it was a good thing that Wu Xian had been biding her time, because this meant that Wu Xian was very patient. Such a person was definitely not easy to deal with. Uncle Long, you're wrong. The reason why Wu Luan hasn't made a move is not because she doesn't know who killed her clone, but because she's afraid of the punishment of the laws of heaven and earth. As the temporary manager of the divine realm, if she starts a massacre in the divine realm, the laws of heaven and earth won't let her off. Otherwise, I'm afraid she would have attacked us long ago. However, with the restrictions of the laws of heaven and earth, she can't deal with us openly and can only do it in secret. Therefore, she won't act rashly until she's certain who killed her clone. The demon explained with a faint smile. There's such a thing? Doesn't that mean we can use the loopholes in the laws of the world to deal with her? Aojia's eyes lit up, and he said excitedly, if that's the case, then the woman's attack would be self-defense. The demon reminded. Chapter 2024. Speculations 2. When Uncle Dragon heard Aojia's words, he looked at him as if he was an idiot and said, If everyone can attack the Master God, and the Master God can only be beaten, would you be willing to be the Master God? He knew very well that the laws of the world forbade divine masters from massacring the divine world, not because they wanted to protect the interests of the people of the divine world, but purely for the sake of the divine world's stability. However, the laws of the world would not forcefully restrict certain things from happening, or else the incident from over 100,000 years ago would not have happened. However, Wu Yan was obviously afraid of the rules of heaven and earth. Otherwise, she would not have been able to endure it. To them, this was definitely a good thing. At least, it gave Shui-Er a chance to improve her strength. In fact, Uncle Long was right. The laws of the heaven and earth existed for the peace of the heaven and earth. However, the laws of the heaven and earth also followed the laws of nature, which determine the superior and the inferior. Therefore, the people of the divine world could have conflicts or even kill each other from time to time, but the divine masters could not easily attack the gods. After all, the divine masters' strength had long surpassed reverent God, and they were the masters of the divine world. If the divine masters wanted to attack the people of the divine world, they only needed to think about it. Thus, the laws of the heaven and earth had restrictions on the divine masters in this aspect. There had to be a reasonable reason. Otherwise, the divine master would be punished by the rules of heaven and earth. As for the severity, it would depend on the degree of the attack. Otherwise, the Fog Phoenix would not have cultivated a group of men in black to sacrifice. The Fog Phoenix would basically send them to do all the shady things. According to the understanding of the laws of heaven and earth, those people were not from the Divine Lord's estate, so they naturally did not belong to the Fog Phoenix. Therefore, this could be considered a small loophole in the laws of heaven and earth. Fortunately, those people were not invincible in the immortal realm. Otherwise, the people of the immortal realm would be in great misery and suffering. However, there were two situations in which Wu Yan could take action. If a god started a rebellion or disrespected the divine master, disdained the divine master's dignity, and provoked the divine master could kill the god. After all, a divine master's dignity could not be blasphemed. On the other hand, if a master god was killed by a god, the rules of heaven and earth would also stand by and watch, because they followed the natural law of the strong being respected, and the weak being the superior. Actually, Wu Jing already knew that it was Lung Ruoxue and the others who had destroyed the mystic realm that she had painstakingly built and killed her clone. However, as her mystic realm could not be exposed to the public, she could only suffer in silence and let Lung Ruoxue and the others live a carefree life for a while. However, once she had the chance, she would definitely not let off those who had once participated in it. And now, she absolutely hated Lung Ruoxue to the core. After all, she had heard from Black One that Lung Ruoxue's flames were very powerful. She was also her greatest nemesis. Hence, she did not wish for Lung Ruoxue to exist in the god world. However, she was still not aware that Lung Ruoxue was Yes' disciple. Otherwise, she would not be able to tolerate Lung Ruoxue anymore. However, Lung Ruoxue had no intention of appearing in front of her now. This time, she had no other choice. Who asked her senior brother to knead the petals of the Mist Ripple's main body. Seeing that Aojia's face fell after hearing Uncle Long's words, Lung Ruoxue sighed softly and said, "Uncle Ao, I understand your desire to get rid of Rime Ice. However, that woman is not easy to deal with. Therefore, we have to make a long-term plan. The most important thing now is to find the real body of Rime Ice and then steal her petals." Yes, Lung Ruoxue had planned to steal it. After all, there was a huge difference in their strength. It was unrealistic for them to make a move on Fog Nation now. Furthermore, Fog Ripple seemed to have many allies. If those people or beasts were to join forces, they would have no chance of winning. However, it was not an easy task to steal the petals of her body without alerting the fog, because the woman's vigilance was too high. Thinking of this, she had a headache. It's easier said than done to find her original body. However, I don't understand. We've already found her clone, so why haven't we seen her true body? That guy Xianyi has lived in the Divine Master's estate for so many years. He should be very confident in these places. However, other than finding one of Wu Chen's clones, We have gained nothing. I found her real clone. How can I get nothing? As for her real body, I think it's normal that we can't find it. After all, it's the most important part of her body, and she won't let anyone find it easily. The demon laughed. A plant's body was extremely important to plant-type cultivators. After all, as long as the body was not destroyed, no matter how badly injured she would recover sooner or later. However, once the body was destroyed and she was injured, it would not be easy for her to recover. There was even the danger of her death. The existence of the main body made it so that the fog could never die. This was one of the characteristics of plants. Lung Ruoxua had also thought of this point. Hence, she contacted the cute little fellows in the bracelet and asked them about their opinions on her original body. Sister, the main body is very important to us plants. As long as the main body doesn't die, no matter how badly injured we won't die. At most, we can cultivate from the beginning. Therefore, we will hide our true bodies well, in places where others will not find us. The small fire ginseng led the way. However, Lung Ruoxua was still skeptical about his words. If she remembered correctly, this little fellow's true form was not hidden in a place that others could not find. Sister, that's because of Zayaha's existence, so I'm not afraid. If those bad people dare to have any ideas about me, Xiahua will bite them to death. Sensing Lung Ruoxia's thoughts, small fire ginseng hurriedly explained, his cute little face still carrying a touch of grievance. Hee, that's true. Lung Ruoxua laughed awkwardly. How could she have forgotten how sensitive these little fellows were? She could not hide her thoughts from them. However, sister, although I have a companion beast, once I encounter an unfathomably strong master, I can only let him slaughter me. After all, I'm still too weak and can't hide my original body well, and it will take many years for me to grow up. Small fire ginseng's mood suddenly became low as he said faintly, heavenly treasures like them were the darlings of heaven and earth. However, it was extremely difficult for them to cultivate. In addition, their medicinal value was extremely high. Their whole body was a treasure. Therefore, many of their kind did not have the opportunity to develop spiritual consciousness. They were discovered and eaten by humans or beasts. This was the greatest sorrow of heavenly treasures. However, it was fortunate that he met his sister. Therefore, although he was not in a good mood when he thought of other kinds of people, he thought of his sister's love and care. His mood improved again. Now he really hoped that more companions would be able to stay at his sister's place. This was definitely a paradise for heavenly treasures like them. His sister would not be like other people who only wanted to eat them, and they could help her. After all, every time they advanced, some leaves would fall off, and those were enough to be used to refine pills. Chapter 2025. Speculations 3. After having such a thought, the small fire ginseng really managed to hook up with quite a number of natural treasures to live in Lung Ruoxia's bangle. Of course, this was definitely not without Qiuqiu's help. And such a combination was also known as the treasure hunting duo, by those who knew. Of course, this was all for the future. After Lung Ruoxua heard what small fire ginseng said, she quickly consoled the little fellow. Little horror, those are all in the past. In the future, Big Sister will protect you and will not let anyone bully you. Don't worry. Yes. Hearing this, small fire ginseng fiercely nodded. At this time, the other little guys also interrupted. Sister, you will protect us too, right? Of course. Lung Ruoxua promised. She felt a little helpless in her heart. She had wanted to ask them where their main bodies were usually hidden, but why had it become her guarantee meeting? However, when she saw the happy smiles of these white and chubby children, her mood improved a lot. These little guys were really too cute. When she thought of this, she could not help but change her mind. Little Fire appeared in her arms. As soon as Little Fire appeared, Aojia's eyes immediately widened, and his mouth was half open. Whose child was this? The fire attributed spiritual qi on his body was so dense. The moment Uncle Long saw Little Fire, he directly snatched him away from Lung Ruoxia's arms. Seeing this, Lung Ruoxua could only move another one out. This time it was the 10,000-year fire lotus. The moment that little fellow saw Lung Ruoxue and the demon, he immediately called out affectionately, "Father, mother, I missed you guys so much." Aojie's eyes widened, and his face was filled with disbelief. He could not help but ask, "Aren't you two not married? She already had a child?" It's still, however, the fire-attributed spiritual chi on this little fellow's body is also unbelievably dense. Hearing Aojie's words, Lung Ruoxue could not help but roll her eyes and said, "You're thinking too much. I didn't give birth to this little thing." After explaining, she regretted it a little. Why was she explaining all this to this beast, Aojie? However, not only did Aojie not understand what Lung Ruoxue said, he was even more confused. Especially after he heard Lung Ruoxue say, "I did not give birth to this little thing." He turned his gaze to the evildoer. Furthermore, it was a rather peculiar gaze. His face was even red with the words, "You're quite bold," written on it. When the demon saw this, he really wanted to give Aojie a beating. However, he could bear with it since there were children around. However, he would remember this suspicion. At this moment, Uncle Long kicked Aojie and said with a straight face, "What nonsense are you thinking about? These two little fellows are born from the heavens and earth. Born from nature. Could it be that they are?" The words treasures of heaven and earth were swallowed back into Aojie's stomach under Lung Ruoxue's warning gaze. However, after he knew that these two children were treasures of heaven and earth, his eyes immediately lit up. He stared at the two cute children without blinking, and the little fire ginseng's hair stood on end from his stare. "Wretched uncle, don't look at us like that. Sister won't let you eat us." Small fire ginseng angrily clenched his small fist and warned. Upon hearing this, Uncle Long burst into laughter. Then he looked at Aojie teasingly and said, "An old man Ao, I won't let you eat them either." "I didn't say that I was going to eat them. I was just too curious. After living for so long, this is the first time I've seen a natural treasure that can transform into a human form. But what's up with this little guy?" Aojie pointed at fire and asked with a puzzled look. "This little thing is the 10,000-year fire lotus. It likes this look." Uncle Long shot a glance at the little fire lotus and explained on Lung Ruoxue's behalf. He had always been in the medium, so he had long become very familiar with these cute little things. As long as one was older, they would not be able to resist the temptation of these cute little things. Hence, he had long treated these little babies as his own juniors and doted on them. "This look is quite special?" Aojie asked in a daze. Previously, when he suspected that this little thing was the child of Lung Ruoxue and that demonic man, he did not think that it was a problem to give birth to a little beast. However, when he heard that it was the 10,000-year fire lotus, he could not remain calm. It was clearly a plant, so why did it transform into a beast? When little fire lotus heard this, it was extremely happy and even started rolling around in Lung Ruoxue's embrace. Can I hug you?" Looking at the cute appearance of the little fire lotus, Aojie's hands were a little itchy. When Lung Ruoxue heard this, she immediately handed the small fire lotus over. However, the small fire lotus was not shy with strangers at all. After staring at Aojie for a while, it fell asleep in Aojie's arms. Seeing the small fire lotus in such a state, Aojie could not believe that this was really a 10,000 years fire lotus. "It's asleep." Aojie pointed at the little fire lotus and said in a daze, "We saw it." Uncle Long rolled his eyes and thought, why did this guy suddenly become so dumb? He definitely did not know this person. How embarrassing. "Uncle Ao, I'll send horror back to sleep." After greeting Aojie, Lung Ruoxue had an idea and sent fire back to her bracelet. As for the small fire ginseng, she left it outside for the time being. "Uncle Long, Uncle Ao, it's getting late. You should rest early." Lung Ruoxue continued. "Yes, little horror will sleep with me tonight." After Uncle Dragon finished speaking, he took the small fire ginseng and returned to his room. Seeing this, Aojie also left. Seeing that there were no outsiders, the evildoer immediately pulled Lung Ruoxue into his arms. "Shuer, don't think too much. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. We'll definitely be able to find the true body of the mist." The demon knew that Shui was depressed. She was so relaxed just now because she didn't want the two old men to worry. Yes, demon. I'm thinking, even if we really find the main body of Rime Ice, do we have the confidence to steal the flower petals from her? What are the chances of success? Lung Ruoxue could not help but ask. Shui, where there's a will, there's a way. No matter what, I'll find a way to help you get the petals from that woman's body, so you have to be confident. Although it's difficult for us to deal with her with our current strength, we can outwit her. Don't think that woman has lived for a long time. She's actually very stupid, so she's easily deceived. The demon said calmly and confidently. Is she stupid? Lung Ruoxue asked doubtfully. It seemed like someone had said that the woman was cunning. However, Lung Ruoxue also knew that the demon called that woman stupid mainly because he was afraid that she would be under too much pressure. So she had to appreciate this favor. Of course she's stupid. Perhaps in the eyes of others she's cunning, but in my eyes she's stupid. You're an ungrateful wolf. The demon said with a look of disdain. Hee hee. Lung Ruoxue laughed lightly after hearing the demon's words. Suddenly, an idea flashed through her mind and she asked again. Evildoer, why do you think there was no one guarding the door of the first secret room we went to? There was no array formation either? Why? You suspect that place? The demon raised his eyebrows and asked. Well, I didn't pay much attention to it before, but now that I think about it, I feel that something is wrong. That's the place Xian Yi provided us with. If he wasn't confident, he wouldn't have told us. But we didn't see anything when we went there. It was empty. But as soon as we entered, Wu Chen discovered it. Don't you think it's too incredible? As a divine master, why would she pay so much attention to a secret chamber that had been empty for a long time? Is this normal? Lung Ruoxue voiced out her doubts, then looked at the evildoer with anticipation. It's not normal. If it were me, I wouldn't pay attention to a useless secret room unless there's something very important there. The demon said after thinking carefully. Something very important. Her true form? Lung Ruoxue guessed. As she said this, her heart was thumping excitedly. If Wu Xian's real body was really in that secret chamber as they had guessed, then she was really smart. As the saying goes, the most dangerous place is also the safest place. And this smokescreen method of Wu Han could not be said to not be brilliant. There were several places in the Divine Master's estate that were heavily guarded. It was easy to guess that there was something important in there. However, a secret room that was unguarded, and without the protection of an array could be easily overlooked. It was also because of this that it was the safest to place his main body there. But, where did she hide her real body in that secret room? Lung Ruoxue knew that if her guess was correct, there should be a universe in that unremarkable secret room. It was a pity that she didn't know about it. That's right, you. She had you. Perhaps you could find some clues there. He just didn't know if Yes' see-through skill could see through that secret room. Lung Ruoxue wasn't too sure about this. At this moment, Yes' voice rang out in Lung Ruoxue's heart. Master, I can try. You took the initiative. Let's try it out tomorrow. Lung Ruoxue said impatiently. And, you nodded. At this moment, the evildoer beside Lung Ruoxue could clearly sense the change in her mood. He could not help but ask. You have a good idea? There it is. Tomorrow, we'll go to that secret room again, and let you see if there's anything inside. Lung Ruoxue said excitedly. Chapter 2026. An Unfavorable Start 1. The demon nodded after hearing Lung Ruoxue's words. Even though he knew from the bottom of his heart that it would be dangerous, he would not reject Shui-er's idea. The next day, Lung Ruoxue told Uncle Long and Audiobook about the same thing. She even changed her gender for safety reasons. When Uncle Long and Audiobook saw that Lung Ruoxue had turned from a woman to a man, their eyes widened, and their faces were filled with disbelief. Was this considered a huge transformation into a living person? No, was it a big change in sex? Shui was clearly a woman, so how did she turn into a man in the blink of an eye? Isn't this too horrifying? The two of them were dumbfounded. He couldn't come back to his senses for a long time. The evildoer, who understood the truth, was also quite depressed when he saw Shui-er's new image. Ever since Qing Ju had this ability, Shuer had always been curious and wanted to try being a man. If he had not stopped her, she would probably. But now, for their safety and to hide her identity more thoroughly, Shuer had no choice but to change her personality. However, this was not what he was most depressed about. What he was most depressed about was that once Shuer changed her gender, she would not be able to change back in a short period of time. It was not that Shuer did not want to change back, but Green Vessel's skill had a 3-month effective period. Therefore, it was impossible for her to change back immediately after changing her gender once. In this regard, Green Vessel was also helpless. However, he could swear that he had definitely seen the smugness and gloating in Qing Ju's eyes. Shuer. As long as he thought about how he would not be able to hold Shuer's soft and delicate body for a few months, his heart would be in a dilemma. He did not want to be lovey-dovey with a man all day long. He could not accept it from the bottom of his heart. At the thought of this, the evildoer's gaze towards Shuer became more and more resentful, while Lung Ruoxue was extremely embarrassed. She didn't expect that her gender change would be so thorough. Her tall mountain peak was gone and replaced by a flat plain. Not only that, in short, she was now a man. Pure. Extremely pure. She didn't miss out on any of the evildoers. Shuer, the evildoer, who had been conflicted and resentful for a long time, could not resist the urge to hug Lung Ruoxue. He stretched out his arms and pulled Lung Ruoxue into his embrace. He felt that the body in his arms was no longer as soft as before. The bouncy little peaks on his chest had also disappeared. He could not help but shiver. However, he did not let go. He would just treat Shuer as an airport runway. A few months would pass by, because he really couldn't control himself from hugging Shuer. As for Uncle Long and Aojie, who were still in a daze, they saw two men hugging each other tightly just as they regained their senses. They were in a mess again. This was really too hardcore. Although the two of them were not young, they were still very pure, especially Uncle Long. Even though he was quite happy when he opened the Yao family brothel, and even planned to open the brothel, he was just saying it casually. It was more to punish others. If he really saw two men doing it, he would still not be able to take it. However, Lung Ruoxue and the evildoer were hugging each other as if there was no one else around. Even when Uncle Long and Aojie had regained their senses, they were still hugging each other. Seeing them like this, the corners of Uncle Long and Aojie's mouths twitched, and their foreheads were full of black lines. I say, you two are both men now, what's the point of hugging? Don't go too far, alright? Aojie couldn't take it anymore. Although he knew that Lung Ruoxue's real body was a woman, she was now a man after all. Hence he was really going crazy. However, they couldn't deny that Lung Ruoxue's actions had indeed made them much safer. Others wouldn't easily suspect them. Let go. What does it look like for two men to be hugging each other? Uncle Long was also going crazy. After hearing the conversation between the two of them, Lung Ruoxue did not know what to say, because she could clearly feel that her relationship with the evildoer was being discriminated against. Is gender really that important? Alright. She was not a fujoshi. She admitted that gender was very important. However, although she was a man now, her core was a woman. Therefore, she did not have the self-awareness of being a man at all. If she was a woman disguised as a man, she might have paid more attention. But now, she had no intention of paying attention at all. Therefore, what Uncle Long and Aojie saw was a charming, devastatingly beautiful man looking at another slightly ugly man with deep affection. Between the two of them, Lung Ruoxue's character had changed after she had consumed the antidote for the disguise pill. Therefore, even though her face and figure had changed, she was still as beautiful as before, while the demon was still as ugly as before. Seeing this scene, the two of them shuddered at the same time. Then they rushed forward and separated the two of them without hesitation. Lung Ruoxue was stunned when she saw their actions. Her beautiful face was still filled with confusion. Wasn't Uncle Long and Aojie overreacting? On the other hand, the demon glared at Uncle Dragon and Aojie in dissatisfaction, and could not help but roar. What are you guys doing? You two can't hug each other. You're both men now. All of you be good. The devilish anger made Uncle Long's heart tremble, but he still mustered his courage and said it. In any case, little Brat Yi had told him to return to how he was in the past. So at this time he didn't care about the other party's identity as the secret mistress. He only wanted to separate the two people who were hugging each other like Siamese twins. Can't men hug each other? The evildoer raised his brows when he heard Uncle Long's words. Even though Shui was not as comfortable to hold as before, she was still his woman. Hence, gender was not important to him. However, Uncle Dragon and Aojia nodded their heads seriously after hearing his words. Seeing this, the demon smiled helplessly and said, Shui is not a real man. Yup. Uncle Long, I'm still a woman. Lung Ruoxue said helplessly. A woman? How come I don't see any part of you that looks like a woman? Uncle Long sized Lung Ruoxue up with a suspicious look. His temperament was similar, so he was probably the sissy people often called him, right? But their figures definitely didn't. However, Uncle Long admired the demon for being able to hug Lung Ruoxue when he saw her in this state. From this, it could be seen that his heart was very strong. Lung Ruoxue could only sigh when she heard this. Alright. She was a man now. Although she didn't want to admit it, her figure couldn't lie. At this moment, Small Fire Ginseng, who could feel Lung Ruoxue's depressed mood, interrupted. Sister, aren't you going to the Divine Master's estate? It should be time to set off. Hearing Small Fire Ginseng's words, Lung Ruoxue really wanted to hug that cute little doll and kiss him a few times. What a good change of topic. Otherwise, Uncle Dragon and Aojia would be at a loss for a long time. She was so depressed that she almost missed such an important thing. Chapter 2027. An unfavorable start. 2. Following that, Lung Ruoxue had an idea. She brought everyone into the bracelet and green vessel took them to the Divine Master's residence. This time, they headed straight for their destination. However, when they reached the door of the secret room, they did not enter immediately. Instead, they carefully observed the entire courtyard through the light screen. This side courtyard that seemed to have been abandoned for a long time was very clean. However, only the main room in the front courtyard had black-clothed men busy. Around this secret room, there was no one. In the bracelet, Lung Ruoxue and the other three sat in front of the light screen. They were surrounded by little beasts, and just like them, they were also staring at the light screen, hoping to find some clues. Among the four of them, only Aojia was not calm. Although he knew that there were many small beasts where he was, the small beasts rarely appeared in front of him during the days he was inside. However, this time, they appeared collectively. He could not help but feel surprised. However, if Aojia knew that these small beasts were only a small portion of Lung Ruoxue's beast army, would his jaw drop? On the other hand, Uncle Long was very calm. He was holding a silver-white wolf in his arms and looked very pleased. In fact, the main reason why Baby and the other beasts appeared today was to cheer for you. After all, they all knew that you was going to see through this place. Although they did not know if she would find anything, they had to come to support you. At this moment, you was standing on Lung Ruoxue's shoulder and was about to see through the light screen. Yes, sharp eyes flickered. Then two dark rays of light shot out from his cold and sharp eyes and pierced through the light screen. But soon he stopped seeing through it. Master, I'm too far away. I can't see what's inside the secret room. You said gloomily. Ever since he had advanced to the 9th rank of the sacred beast realm, his ability to see through things had greatly increased. If it was outside, he would have no problem seeing through things 10,000 meters away. However, here, he couldn't even see through a wall. This result made him extremely depressed. However, he knew that this was no ordinary place. Then let's go into the secret room. Lung Ruoxue could feel Yes' dejected mood, and gently stroked its feathers to comfort it. And, you nodded. It would be great if it could get inside to see through things. However, it would be more dangerous. Therefore, it had to be careful. Following that, Lung Ruoxue gave Qingju a look. Qingju understood and controlled the universal bracelet that had turned into dust to sneak into the secret chamber. After entering the secret room, Yu was ready. Just as he sent his transparent dark light out through the light screen, he felt a sharp pain in his head. Then his eyes began to hurt too. Then his vision turned black and he could not see anything. Master! My eyes! You endured the pain and covered his eyes with his wings as he shouted. At this moment, Lung Ruoxua had also noticed that something was wrong with you. She hurriedly held it in her arms and asked with concern. What's wrong with you? Suddenly, she realized that Yes' eyes were bleeding. Lung Ruoxua's heart ached as she hurriedly took out a healing pill for you to consume. Are you feeling better? Lung Ruoxua asked worriedly. It's better, it doesn't hurt anymore. You said hurriedly. However, it did not dare to tell Lung Ruoxua that its eyes could no longer see. Sister, what do we do now? When Qingju saw Yes' appearance, he guessed that you had been discovered by fog. It was obviously not a good time to continue investigating. Let's go back to the inn first. Lung Ruoxua said after some thought. She was still a little worried about you. Qingju nodded and immediately brought Lung Ruoxua and the rest back to the inn. Not long after Lung Ruoxua and the rest left the secret chamber, a beautiful lady in red appeared. This woman was Wuxia. Originally, after she felt the strangeness in the secret room, she was afraid that the person would run away, so she immediately launched a divine sense attack. Then she rushed over. However, after arriving here, she angrily found that the person she had hit had disappeared. She was very sure that the person who sneaked into her secret room must have been injured. She was not slow in coming here, but that person still managed to escape. This fact made her extremely angry. Damn it. If she caught that person, she would definitely cut him into 8 pieces. Now she was certain that someone had indeed snuck into her divine master's estate. Of course, it could also be a traitor. However, no matter who it was, she had to find out who it was. Since they dared to come here, they had to be prepared to die. Especially when she found this place, she would not let that person go. But she couldn't think of anyone who would have the guts to cause trouble in the Divine Master's estate. Perhaps it was time to clean up the Divine Master's residence. After thinking about this, Wu Qin immediately disappeared. At the same time, Lung Ruoxua and the rest had also returned to the inn. Even though Lung Ruoxua felt a little helpless about today's fruitless return, she was more worried about you. After consuming the pill, you returned to his room and did not come out again. This made her feel a little uneasy. Baby, go and see you. At this moment, Lung Ruoxua called for her precious and instructed. Although she really wanted to go personally, she was afraid that you would only report the good news and not the bad news. There were some things that you would not be willing to tell her. Hence, it seemed that it would be easier for the beastie to communicate with each other at this moment. Yes, my lovely master. Baby responded and turned to look for you. Very quickly, Baby ran out of Yes' room and said to Lung Ruoxua, my lovely master, don't worry. I'm just a little tired and I'm resting. But I'll be with it. After saying that, it ran back to Yes' room. Sister, don't worry. I think you just suffered a little shock. You will be fine. Qingju also came to Lung Ruoxua's side and consoled her. I hope so. Lung Ruoxua nodded, but she was still feeling uneasy. Something was not right with you. However, she respected Yes' choice. As long as you did not tell her, she would not ask. She would not probe her beastie's thoughts. As she thought about this, the annoyed Lung Ruoxua pulled the demon back to the purple bamboo house. Uncle Dragon and Audiobook chose to sit in the garden. Uncle Long sighed. He didn't expect that the bird would be injured without seeing through anything. This was really a bad start. Old whale, why are you sighing? This little girl is already annoying enough, and you still want to be like this? Audiobook couldn't stand it anymore. I thought the girl wasn't here. Uncle Long said listlessly. All right. She was not here. Then you can continue sighing. I'm going to see that little bird. After Audiobook finished speaking, he stood up and walked towards Yes' room. Chapter 2028. An Unfavorable Start 3. Just as he walked out of the room, he heard voices coming from inside. Although he did not mean to eavesdrop, he could not help but want to know how little beastie interacted with each other in private. So, he was extremely depressed and decided to be a shameless eavesdropper. In Yes' room, other than the treasures, the Mei Ling Qi, and other beasts were all there. However, their faces were filled with worry. They all looked nervously at Feng Zhan, who was examining the feather, and asked questions at the same time. Grandpa Zhan, how is you? Is he all right? Grandpa Zhan, you have to think of a way. Grandpa, you am so pitiful. Please help it. The little beasts spoke one after another, and Feng Zhan's ears buzzed from hearing them. All of you shut up. No one is allowed to speak. Feng Zhan couldn't take it anymore. Although it was a phoenix, it knew a little about medicine. So, after examining you, its face was full of seriousness. Seeing it like this, all the little beasts' hearts were in their throats. Grandpa Zhan. The little beasts, led by the baby, all looked at Feng Zhan with tears in their eyes. Feng Zhan couldn't help but frown. Why are you guys acting like this? I didn't say anything. Feng Zhan was speechless. You didn't say it, but you showed it. You didn't say a word, so of course they were worried. The little beasts couldn't help but feel worried. Then Feng Zhan let out another heavy sigh. The little beasts' hearts sank when they heard his sigh. Fortunately, Feng Zhan had knocked you out. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in a good mood when she saw them like this. What happened? At this moment Audiobook, who had been eavesdropping outside the door, pushed the door open and walked in with big steps. However, when he saw the huge Feng Zhan in the middle of the room, he was obviously stunned. Oh my God! What was this thing? Phoenix. He didn't see wrong, did he? How could there be a phoenix here? Furthermore, this old phoenix's strength was not low. Then he saw the mimicked Feng Zhan, and his face immediately twitched. Why was there another one? There was also a white tiger. This time he had basically seen all of Lung Ruox's beasts. However, this was not all. Furthermore, Lung Ruox's beasts, even Ziyu and the others who existed in human form, did not like strangers. As Audiobook was not familiar with them, he was naturally considered a stranger. Hence, in reality, Audiobook had not seen many of Lung Ruox's beasts. Even during the period of time that he had been living in the bracelet, the beasts had rarely appeared in front of him. This was because they could tell. Audiobook was not reliable. As a matter of fact, Audiobook was indeed unreliable. After seeing Feng Zhan, and Baisu, he stood there in a daze for a long time without saying a word. When he came back to his senses, he was met with the beast's disdainful gazes. Instantly, Audiobook's face was burning. Seeing Audiobook, Feng Zhan only nodded slightly but didn't say anything. It was as if it was normal to see him. However, Audiobook couldn't stay calm. Have I seen you somewhere before? Audiobook looked at Feng Zhan and asked. Yup. However, your memory isn't that good. You actually don't recognize me. Feng Zhan said indifferently, the expression on his face as calm as the wind. They also knew each other. Hearing this, Audiobook was even more confused. Feng Zhan saw this and kindly reminded him. I used to be a guard of the Phoenix King. Ah. Audiobook cried out in surprise. He looked Feng Zhan up and down with his eyes wide open, then said with uncertainty, Why, you're Feng Zhan? Fuck. He couldn't be blamed for not recognizing them. The main reason was that these phoenixes looked almost the same when they transformed into their original forms. They were all birds, so who could tell them apart so clearly? Yes. Feng Zhan nodded. Although he didn't know Uncle Dragon, he knew Audiobook. They had met a few times, but this guy's memory wasn't very good. He couldn't tell who was who. Now that he could call out his name accurately, he was very pleased. You're still alive? After confirming, Audiobook asked excitedly. Yup. My old bones are still alive, and now I've returned to the divine realm. It's really not easy. Feng Zhan sighed. It's good that you're alive. By the way, why are you with that little girl? Audiobook asked curiously. That little girl is my master now. Feng Zhan said indifferently. Ah. Feng Zhan's answer stunned Audiobook. This was beyond his expectations. I say, old man, it's been so many years. Why are you still so stupid? Feng Zhan joked when he saw Audiobook's expression. How am I silly? Upon hearing this, Audiobook was a little angry. If you're not stupid, then why are you always so dazed? No wonder the Phoenix King always says you're a fool, and even told us to take care of you. During the years when we were not in the divine realm, you must have been bullied by many people, right? As he spoke, Feng Zhan looked at Aojia with more and more sympathy, which made Aojia feel uncomfortable. I am not as stupid as you say. Aojia couldn't stand Feng Zhan's pitiful look and shouted. However, his words sounded weak. He sighed when he thought of the situation the Phoenix King was in. When he had just inherited the throne of the Golden Eagle tribe, he went to the Phoenix tribe to challenge the king of the Phoenix tribe. The result was obvious. However, after he lost, the king of the Phoenix did not kill him. Instead, he taught him well. Therefore, he had always been grateful to the king of the Phoenix. Although the king of the Phoenix did not admit that he was his master, in his heart, the king of the Phoenix was his master. Unfortunately, he could do nothing when his master was in trouble. And the Golden Eagle clan had also played a role in adding fuel to the fire. For hundreds of thousands of years, the Golden Eagle kind had been seeing the Phoenix kind as their biggest enemy. The main cause of the conflict between the two races was the fight between the royal divine beasts of the divine world. When the divine realm had just been established, all order still needed to be improved. In order to better manage the divine realm, the Master God had chosen 8 of the most powerful clans from the human race and 4 from the magical beasts to act as the representatives of the human and magical beasts to assist the Master God in better managing the divine realm. At that time, the competition between the human and beast races was extremely fierce. Among the beast races, the land beasts were the strongest, while the flying and crawling beasts were slightly weaker. As a result, the land beasts occupied 2 of the 4 spots, while the other 2 spots were divided between the flying and crawling beasts. They became the 4 great beast races that were later respectfully called the 4 great king divine beasts. Among the flying beasts, the Phoenix clan and the Eagle clan were the strongest. The Golden Eagle clan was the leader of the Eagle clan. However, in the final selection, the Golden Eagle clan lost to the Phoenix clan. Therefore, the conflict between the 2 clans was formed. Chapter 2029. An unfavorable start for. Since then, the conflict between the Phoenix tribe and the Golden Eagle tribe had been endless. In the end, it developed into a conflict between the 2 tribes. In the end, the Divine Master came forward and resolved the conflict with a fair duel. However, the ancestor of the Golden Eagle tribe was a narrow-minded person. After returning to the tribe, he died a few days later due to a heart attack. Therefore, some members of the Golden Eagle tribe hated the Phoenix King. They didn't dare to cause trouble for the Phoenix clan on the surface, but they had definitely schemed against the Phoenix clan in secret. However, the anger of the Phoenix clan was suppressed by the magnanimous King Feng. Therefore, the 2 clans seemed to be at peace on the surface, but there had been an undercurrent in private. After he inherited the throne of the Golden Eagle tribe, he was young and impetuous. He had heard a lot of complaints about the Phoenix King from his tribe since he was a child, so he impulsively came to challenge the Phoenix King. As time went by, he naturally learned more about the Phoenix King's way of doing things. As he learned more about the Phoenix King, his hostility toward the Phoenix King slowly turned into admiration, and he became closer to the people of the Phoenix tribe. Under his leadership, the young members of the Golden Eagle tribe started to complain less and less about the Phoenix tribe. Some of them even became good friends with the Phoenix tribe. Originally, if this situation continued, it would be beneficial to the Golden Eagle tribe. However, some people could not bear to see the 2 tribes getting along, so they betrayed him, the king of the Golden Eagle tribe, and cooperated with Wu Ling to kill the Phoenix King and Lord Yu. Of course, the Golden Eagle tribe was not the only one responsible for this. Many other beast tribes were also involved. However, as the king of the Golden Eagle tribe, the shame of being betrayed had always followed him. Although he had finally taken back the throne of the Golden Eagle tribe and cleaned up the rebels, he had never been able to save the Phoenix King. He had also never been able to avenge Lord Yu, which was his biggest regret. He regarded the Phoenix King as his master's family, and Master Yu as his idol, and someone he wanted to follow. So he had to save and take revenge on both of them. But after so many years, he had not been able to get close to them. This fact had always made him depressed. Now, when he saw the guards by the Phoenix King's side, he felt extremely close to them. Even his eyes were slightly red. His eyes were hot, and some unknown liquid began to flow in them. "You're not stupid?" Seeing Aojie's reaction, Fengzhan glanced at him and said calmly, "Of course I'm not stupid. I'm very smart." Upon hearing this, Aojie quickly retorted. The sadness he felt earlier also disappeared without a trace. "Hehe. You really haven't changed at all." Seeing Aojie's familiar expression, Fengzhan was overjoyed. In the past, they liked to tease this stupid little eagle when they had nothing to do. Every time they saw him stomping his feet in anger, they would be very happy. Then they would throw him some phoenix fruits as a reward for pleasing them. At that time, this little eagle would be even more angry. However, it just so happened that it didn't have any phoenix fruit on hand right now. Otherwise, it would really want to throw it to him like before. Fengzhan thought to himself with evil intentions. Fortunately, Aojie didn't know what Fengzhan was thinking. Otherwise, he would have run as far away as he could. But now, Aojie was more friendly with Fengzhan, so he ignored Fengzhan's joke and asked him about their whereabouts all these years. When he found out that Fengzhan and the rest of the Feng clan had been exiled to the lower realm for so many years and had almost lost their lives, all the guilt in his heart surged up. After a long while, he finally apologized. "I'm sorry." Back then the Golden Eagle clan, however, before he could finish, Fengzhan interrupted him. "What happened back then had nothing to do with you. There's also a traitor in the Phoenix clan. A great tribulation of the divine realm," Fengzhan said with a worried face. Every time he thought about the Phoenix King and his people still suffering, his heart ached as if it was being cut by a knife. Then he thought of Fengzhan and changed the topic. "He's Fengzhan, the youngest son of the Phoenix King. He was born in the lower realm." Fengzhan. After hearing Fengzhan's introduction, Aojie sized up Fengzhan and couldn't help but pick him up. However, Fengzhan rejected his hug. "Damn it. Let me go. Other than my master, I won't allow anyone else to hug me." Fengzhan roared in anger. Although Fengzhan and the other clansmen wanted to hug him from time to time, he had always avoided them whenever he could. If he couldn't avoid them, he would let them hug him. But who the hell was this guy in front of him? What right did he have to hug her? Is this little fellow really the son of the Phoenix King? Why is your temper so bad? Looking at Fengzhan, who was struggling in his arms, Aojie hugged him even tighter. However, his face was filled with suspicion. After all, in his heart, the Phoenix King was a gentle and elegant beast king. Unlike this little thing who was like a barrel of explosives. "I'm sure." Fengzhan's face darkened when he heard Aojie's words. "Oh, you must have spoiled it too much. Why don't you hand it over to me? I'll be responsible for raising it. Otherwise, if the Phoenix King finds out that his son has such a bad temper, he will be disappointed." Aojie suggested. "Do I need you to meddle?" Aojie's words made Fengzhan clench his teeth in hatred. What kind of person was this? Was there anyone so familiar with him? Hugging at the moment he came up and even saying that he wanted to teach it, he really angered the phoenix to death. Seeing that Fengzhan was about to vomit blood from Aojie's anger, Mei could only say, "Grandpa Fengzhan, you still haven't told us about Ye's condition." As she said this, the mice's forehead was filled with black lines. These people really knew how to go off topic. They had clearly gathered here for the matter of you, but in the end, it had become a family reunion. However, on account that they were old acquaintances, these little beasts did not disturb them. However, they had to make a sound now. They were really afraid that Fengzhan and Aojie would fight. Yup. Fengzhan scratched his head in embarrassment, then tried to come up with an excuse. Its eyes were burned by its consciousness. Although Schwer gave it some healing pills, the other party was too strong, so its injuries were quite serious. It has already injured its optic nerve, so it will take some time to recover. But it won't be blind forever, don't worry. In fact, there was one more thing that it didn't say. It would take a long time to completely recover. Fortunately, Schwer had given it the best healing pills. Otherwise, you would have no fate with the light. After hearing Fengzhan's words, the little beasts finally relaxed. At this time you slowly woke up, but it was all dark in front of him, which made him very uncomfortable. He struggled to get up, but accidentally fell off the bed. Be careful. Feng Zhan was the closest to it. When he saw this, he quickly flew out of Aojia's arms and caught the feather that almost fell to the ground. Then he carefully placed it on the bed. Chapter 2030. An Unfavorable Start 5. The other little beasts also surrounded you in fear, each of them asking about her well-being. Seeing this scene, Aojia smiled. It seemed that the little phoenix was not angry at everyone, and these little beasts were so harmonious that it made people envious and jealous. Don't tell Master about me. Feather's eyes searched around, but could not find the focus. It was obviously speaking to Aojia. Are you sure you don't want to tell her? If she knew that you hid such a big thing from her, I think that little girl will be angry. I don't know if we, who know the truth, can withstand her anger. Aojia laughed when he heard Yes' words. However, as soon as he said that, the little beasts present could not help but tremble in their hearts. Their eyes were also wavering. When Aojia saw this, he knew that these little beasts were all conflicted in their hearts. As expected, Feng Zhan was the first to hesitate. Why don't I let Master know? This matter can be kept a secret. Feng Zhan said after some thought. Master will feel guilty. You said softly. He didn't want his master to blame himself, so he didn't want his master to know. Who said I would feel guilty? I only feel heartache. All of a sudden, Lung Ruoxia's voice rang in the ears of the little beasts. Instantly, the scene turned into a mess. When the little beasts heard their master's voice, they all subconsciously looked for a place to hide. Seeing them like this, Aojia laughed in his heart. Actually, he had long noticed Lung Ruoxia's arrival, but he just didn't say it out loud. At this moment, Lung Ruoxia and the demon walked in. Lung Ruoxia's heart ached when she saw you lying on the bed like a pitiful little thing, not knowing what to do. She immediately took you into her arms and gently stroked its soft feathers without saying a word. Seeing that Lung Ruoxia wasn't saying anything, Feng Zhan felt very uncertain. However, he had nowhere to hide because he wasn't in his mimicry form. Sob. It's too late to use the mimicry now. And Master. Feather was very uneasy, especially when its master was silent. It didn't know if its master was angry. How should I punish you? You. After a long while, Lung Ruoxia glanced at Feng Zhan, who was also restless, and said indifferently, You actually dare to hide this from me? Without giving you a chance to speak, Lung Ruoxia continued. However, her voice was a little colder than before. Master, I was wrong. You quickly admitted his mistake. Where did I go wrong? Lung Ruoxia asked. I shouldn't have hidden it from Master. You said. Yes, there's more. Lung Ruoxia continued to ask without any expression. I shouldn't have let them help me hide this from Master. Yes' voice became softer and softer. Towards the end, she buried her little head into Lung Ruoxia's arms, not daring to raise her head. It's good that you know. How could you hide this from me? Do you think you can hide it from me? Lung Ruoxia's voice became gentler. She no longer tried to scare it, leaving behind only heartache. Ai. This little fool Yu was afraid that she would blame herself, so he didn't tell her that he had lost his sight. This made her very upset as a master. Her beastie was too sensible, so sensible that it made her heart ache. It seemed that sometimes it was not a good thing to respect one's own beastie too much. They even dared to hide things from him. This time, it was also because the evildoer noticed that Lung Ruoxia was a little absent-minded. She was obviously worried about you. Yet she wanted to respect her beastie's privacy. He could not bear to see her fidgeting, so he suggested that she secretly come over to take a look. This way, she would be at ease if nothing happened, and if something really happened, it would not be delayed. But now, it seemed that they had come to the right place. Something had indeed happened to you. Thinking of Yes' condition, Lung Ruoxia examined it in detail again. After confirming that only its divine vision had been seriously injured and could be recuperated, she was finally at ease. However, even though she was friendly to you, it didn't mean that she would let the other beasts go. Still not coming out. How long are you going to hide? Lung Ruoxia's tone was a little cold. Hearing this, the little beasts did not dare to hide anymore. They hurriedly came out from their hiding places, which were under the bed and the cupboard. Then they spontaneously came to Lung Ruoxia's side and acted coquettishly with her. However, Lung Ruoxia was unmoved, her face still cold. "Master, we didn't mean to hide it from you." Seeing that their master was still pulling a long face after coaxing them for a long time, the baby was a little scared and quickly admitted its mistake. "And it wasn't on purpose. You guys did it on purpose." Lung Ruoxia came to an important conclusion. The moment she said this, baby's ears drooped down and it looked at Lung Ruoxia pitifully. It looked as obedient as it could be. However, Lung Ruoxia, who was familiar with its temperament, did not fall for it. "Master, I know I was wrong." At this moment, the Mei also spoke up, her face still filled with guilt. "Yes, I know that Mei is a person who values relationships and loyalty. Don't do it again." Lung Ruoxia caressed Mei's soft fur and said gently. When Mei heard this, she quickly jumped into Lung Ruoxia's arms and rubbed against her affectionately. She was finally at ease. "Oh, Master forgave it, that's great." The Mei was extremely excited, but the baby was even more depressed. "My lovely master, how can you treat me differently?" Baby was extremely aggrieved. His pair of silver eyes met Lung Ruoxia's resentfully. "You're the first one to help you hide it from me, right?" Lung Ruoxia asked with an evil smile. Baby was speechless. Could it say no? Obviously not. Cute master, I was forced to do this." Baby explained in a low voice. "Oh, tell me about it." Lung Ruoxia said with a smile. "You as my friend, I can't not help him. And you are my master, I don't want to hide it from you, so I am in a dilemma. However, I was also afraid that you would blame yourself for yes' sake. So I was moved by it. But I was definitely hiding it from you out of goodwill, really. I promise." When baby said this, it even raised one of its little claws as if it was making an oath to prove that it was not lying. Chapter 2031. Who's the sheep one? In that case, not only should I not punish you, but I should also praise you. Lung Ruoxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she heard her baby's words. This little fox had always been sharp-tongued, and was indeed made for diplomacy. However, she was more interested in hearing how it would explain itself. Therefore, when she said this, her face was stern. "I'm already very satisfied that my cute master didn't punish me. I don't even dare to ask for praise." After hearing Lung Ruoxia's words, baby said with a slight grievance. "Do you feel wronged?" Lung Ruoxia glanced at baby's tiny appearance and said indifferently. "I don't feel wronged." Baby hesitated for a moment before saying. Although it said that, its face still had an aggrieved expression. "Since you don't feel aggrieved, then accept your punishment." Lung Ruoxia laughed evilly. "All right then." Baby wanted to cry but had no tears. It thought to itself, "Why isn't it working when it's acting pitiful?" At first, it thought that if it pretended to be weak, its cute master would not punish it because of his heartache. Who knew that it had no effect at all? As it thought about it, it really felt wronged. Tears slowly welled up in its eyes, rolling in its beautiful silver eyes, but they did not fall. At this moment, Lung Ruoxia picked up the small and exquisite treasure with one hand and said in amazement, "Oh my, you look so adorable. If I take you out for a walk like this, I don't know how many women will be envious." Baby was dumbfounded when it heard that. It felt that it had overreached itself. "Oh, good master. Good sister." It didn't want to go out like this. Otherwise, it would be swallowed alive by those female tigers outside. "Ha ha ha. I've decided that your punishment will be to go out with me like this." Lung Ruoxia said with a hint of mischief in her voice. "Don't." Baby was wailing in pain in its heart. It didn't want to go out. "Master, you can't bully an honest fox like this." After thinking about it again and again, it decided to share the good fortune and the bad. So it made up its mind and said, "Cute master, I'm not the only one who has been hiding things from you." Although it had only said half of the sentence, it believed that its smart master would understand. But as soon as it said this, it immediately received daggers from all the beasts. It was obvious that it had angered the public. However, the arrow was already on the bow and had to be released. Therefore, it could only bite the bullet and drag the other beasts into the water. Anyway, even if it didn't say this, its master would punish them. With this in mind, Baby's heart was at ease. You're right. Oh. How should I punish you? Lung Ruoxua nodded in agreement at Baby's words. Then, her beautiful eyes began to scan the other beasties' bodies, causing the other beasties' hearts to shiver. Fengzhan felt uncomfortable under Lung Ruoxia's gaze. He mumbled, am not allowed to eat for 3 days. It took the initiative to suggest this. It even thought that this was a very serious punishment for it, because it had fallen in love with human food, especially the food at Lung Ruoxia's house. It was really painful for it not to eat for a day. Isn't 3 days too short? Lung Ruoxua asked with uncertainty. It's not a small amount. For a foodie, not eating delicious food for a meal is extremely painful. Fengzhan said with a bitter face. That's true. Then I'll punish you by not eating for 3 days. Lung Ruoxua gave Fengzhan a lot of face. After all, he was an ancestor of the Phoenix clan. Thank you, little girl. Fengzhan sighed. What the hell is this? It had to thank her for being punished, but it knew that it was better to take the initiative than to let the little girl settle the score later. If that was the case, its punishment would be even more severe. Confessing and surrendering themselves were the rhythm of admitting their mistakes. Seeing that his problem had been solved, Fengzhan didn't want to get involved in anything else. He lay on the ground without moving and started to act as an accessory. Seeing that Fengzhan's punishment was so light, the beasts also complained that they wouldn't eat for 3 days. They only begged their master to forgive them for hiding the truth out of goodwill. However, Lung Ruoxua wouldn't let them have their way. No. Lung Ruoxua rejected him without even thinking. Master, why not? The referee asked in confusion. This punishment is too light for you. Lung Ruoxua said with a smile. It's not light. Didn't Grandfather Fengzhan punish me the same way? Richard was very unconvinced. In fact, it wanted to say that the May had not been punished by its master, and had been forgiven. Sob. What a huge difference in treatment. It was too unfair. However, it only dared to complain in its heart, and did not dare to say it out loud. It's a glutton. Not eating for 3 days is already a heavy punishment, but you guys aren't. Lung Ruoxua replied matter-of-factly. Master, we also like food. Hearing this, all the beastie beasts said in unison. Liking food and being a foodie are 2 different concepts. So don't think about it. You'll receive the same punishment. Lung Ruoxua directly destroyed their hopes. Then she continued. Judge, your punishment is to go farm with Qingju for 3 days, Ling will be grounded for 3 days, and Fengzhan will train with Uncle Ao for 3 days. Lung Ruoxua listed out the punishment for the little beasts one by one. Every time she mentioned a beast, the little beast's face would fall. This was because the punishment that their master was talking about was the punishment that they hated the most. Little guy, you've finally fallen into my hands. Aojia looked at Fengzhan and said with his eyes shining. Lung Ruoxia's punishment made him very excited. This was the youngest son of the Phoenix King. He had to teach her well. As he thought of this, he instantly thought of several training plans in his heart. He was prepared to train Fengzhan well. When Fengzhan saw the happy and wretched expression on Aojia's face, he thought about how to get rid of it. With this, their battle of wits and courage had officially begun. Lung Ruoxua did not care about the undercurrent between them. After she was done explaining the punishment for the beasts, she carried Yu and left with the demon. As soon as they left, a series of sighs could be heard in Yes' room. Aojia picked up Fengzhan, who was still struggling, and left. Damn it, let me go. Don't touch me. Fengzhan's howls reverberated in the bangle. However, the old phoenixes all pretended to be deaf and mute. This was the little girl's punishment, and they could only watch. At that moment, Uncle Dragon, who was drinking tea in the garden, saw Aojia returning with a little phoenix in his arms. His face was full of question marks. This little phoenix is... Uncle Long was very curious. He knew that the little girl had phoenixes, but these phoenixes would not appear in front of him easily. To put it bluntly, they did not meet outsiders. He's the youngest son of the Phoenix King. I'll train the little girl for 3 days. Audiobook said with a smile. His wrinkled old face was about to burst into a smile. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.